November 14th, 2023, meeting of the Planning Board. First, we'll take a roll call to introduce board members and staff. Kate Wynn.
Here, shocked to be called first.
I like to change it up, just to be fair. Chris Pfaff.
Here.
Phil Giordano.
I'm here.
Josh Ames.
Here.
We also have Jessica Cole with us. We have Elijah Romulus, who is our town planner. Jessica is our wonderful recording secretary. We have Amanda Wolf, and let me see if I get your title right, our zoning and land use planner. No, I still don't get it right.
Housing and land use planner.
Housing and land use planner. All right. And we also have Alex Portillo from Westwood Media Center. Oh, and it looks like we have Nora Loughnane, who is our Director of Community and Economic Development, with us this evening as well. All right. The meeting is recorded by Westwood Media Center and broadcast live on local cable television Comcast Channel 6 and Verizon Channel 42. Meetings are also live on the Westwood Media Center's YouTube channel. If you're interested in joining the meeting via Zoom, you can find the login directions in the Planning Board meeting notice that is posted to the calendar section of the town's webpage at https://www.townhall.westwood.ma.us/. We will begin the meeting with only the board members and staff unmuted and on video. As the chair recognizes individuals to speak, we will unmute them. Board members may choose to mute themselves when they are not speaking in order to minimize background noise. For applications, the chair will first invite the applicants to address the board and give a presentation summarizing what is being requested. Board members receive the application materials prior to the meeting and will have reviewed them. Board members may ask questions during and following the presentation. Staff and outside experts will provide comments to the board. If the issue includes a public hearing, the board will then proceed to the public comment portion of the public hearing and will restate the instructions. In this remote meeting format, residents and guests may participate in several ways. Attendees should raise their hand and wait to be unmuted and recognized to speak over the Zoom meeting application or from a telephone dial-up. We will be able to hear you but not see you. Additionally, comments may be submitted by email or regular mail prior to the meeting. When we come to that part of the meeting, I will remind everyone of the process. Following the public comment portion, the board will deliberate and make a decision or continue the hearing to a specific future date. All remote meetings require that votes be taken by roll call. When a motion and a second has been made, the chair will ask if there is any further discussion before proceeding to a roll call vote and will then restate the results of the vote. Okay. So, Elijah, do we have any changes to our agenda this evening?
Yes. So the applicant for 1054 High Street has actually asked for a continuance to the next planning board meeting to fulfill all the updates that they need to do for the project.
Okay. Would it be best to continue that now or take it in order of the agenda and start with the first application? Is there a preferred way to approach that?
We can do it after the first agenda item, just in case anyone was here for that one.
Right. Okay. All right, great. Thank you for that update. Then we will get right into our first agenda item is 22 Everett Street, continuation of the public hearing for consideration of mixed-use multifamily residential overlay district, Mumford, special permit for mixed-use redevelopment, 22 Everett Street, continued from October 24th, 2023. Welcome, Giorgio and Peter Zacco. We have the applicants here and some reps from Bowler. Welcome, nice to see you.
Good evening.
Good evening, everyone.
Let's see. For the record, Peter Zacca, attorney representing PP Everett Street LLC. Giorgio Petruzziello, who is the principal, I see has been promoted. Mike McKay has been promoted, who's the project architect. Ken Cram has been promoted. He is the project traffic engineer. And Angela Botto from Bowler Engineering, the civil engineer. I believe that's it. I will, looking at the participants list here, or the attendees, and I think I got everybody on our team.
Great.
If I missed anybody, I apologize. If I could, I just update you on what we've done since the last meeting, which I think has been a considerable amount of work. As we had indicated we were, and as requested, we did have a meeting with the Westwood School folks. I thought that meeting went very well. It was a good opportunity for us to really explain the project to them. We had Mark Fougier with us, so we could sit down and explain to them how we calculated out the projected school age children, how we did our numbers. I thought it was a good meeting overall. In addition to that, Giorgio did meet with the residents over at Rose Court to discuss the project with them. Giorgio told me it went very well. I think they served him coffee and cakes. Did they, Giorgio? Did you get served coffee and cakes at that? Yes. So that went well. We did that as well. The town of Norwood, as you know, had requested to do their own peer review on our traffic. They have done that. They've submitted it. It was, I don't think it added a lot to the picture, but it satisfied Norwood, so that was good. I think the top of my head, the major thing that they had asked, I mean, they concurred with the, do not block the intersection. I think they requested a stop sign, an internal stop sign to be added. Ken can probably update you more if we want to get into their peer review, but it seemed to agree with what Ken had done as modified or amended based on Tom Houston's peer review. So that was good. In addition to that, I thought it was early in the project, but we had been requested, I think, by the board to submit what I called a preliminary TDM, Transportation Demand Management Plan. We have done that. That was also peer reviewed by Tom Houston. And as a result of that, we amended it. Tom's comments were to, we put incentives in there to encourage use of the commuter rail and public bus, or put it a better way, to try to entice people not to be having or using their automobiles. And that included incentives in the nature of payments by the applicant to people who can show that they are using the public transportation. We also have in there that at the, I forget what the percentage is, but once we have occupancy, we will see if there is a need or a demand for a shuttle bus during the peak hours, so we can have people using that shuttle bus. The peer review asked us to basically incorporate what we were doing to include the commercial aspect of the project. We had focused on the residential, so that we have amended that, and we are adopting those suggested changes. And finally, we had a meeting with Elijah, Nora, and Amanda, basically to talk about the project and where it was. And a lot of that focus, which I think may be a focus of tonight's discussion, had to do with the affordable component of the project. And I thank Elijah because he did send us in advance some of the proposed language, should there be an approval of this project, of the conditions. Earlier today, after reviewing that with the team, I have sent back some suggested language. A lot of it was tweaking. I think, again, the most significant part of the discussion, there may be more from the planning board's perspective, but from my perspective, the most, probably the most, I was going to use the word disagreement. I don't want to say, but the part that needs more discussion is, again, the affordable component of the project. And I can dive into that or take your lead and go from wherever you like us to.
I think the affordable housing component is definitely a huge part of what we need to talk about tonight. I think that would be good. And then maybe we can take a look at the TDM as well, because that is a new document. And it's of great interest to me. I can't speak for my colleagues as well, but I think that as one of the big concerns we had was, the traffic impacts and the limits of the site, the TDM seems to be the best possible tool to really alleviate some of the potential traffic impacts. So if my colleagues have other things they'd like, if you have input on how you'd like to proceed with the conversation, please let me know. Feel free to speak. But otherwise, I would say, yeah, let's hear your perspective on the affordable housing distribution, and then maybe talk about the TDM, and then we can go from there.
Okay. So as the board is aware, with the 150 unit project that is before the board, we have a requirement to have 23 affordable units. Typically, those affordable units, which come under the local action unit, program, typically those are made available based on people who satisfy the 80% or under AMI, average medium income. In the discussion with Elijah, there was a request that the applicant also include have some of those units be available to people who satisfy satisfy what I'll call the 60% AMI. There is clearly a there's a rent differential between those, because the rents that the state allows you are, I think, based on 30% of your income, or of that income, in terms of how they establish the rents. The applicant indicated an agreement to have 3 units. I think it was one bedroom, 1 2-bedroom, and 1 3-bedroom at the 60% AMI, but with a caveat. The town of Westwood does not allow, or may not allow, the full rents, maximum rent that the state allows one to charge for the 80% AMI units. I had Elijah, do you have that? Are you able to bring up that 3 or 4 sheet? I don't know if I know how to do it.
Yeah, just give me 1 second. I can take a look.
So what happens is the project, from our perspective, and you'll see if this comes up because it's easier for me to explain when you have the numbers in front of you. So we ran the numbers based on what the town was indicating that their preferred rent for the 80%, and the project becomes sort of uneconomic, or it becomes basically non-financeable when the bank runs the numbers. They use the state figures, and using the town's figures, it is a project that we found to be unfinanceable. I'm just going to use the word unfinanceable. And okay, good. Okay, so I put this little graphic together to help explain it. So the anticipated rents, as you can see, if you can read on this chart, but you can see the differential on each one. In the light blue in the middle of the chart, we're zeroing in on the 80% AMI. So you can see the numbers that were provided to us by Amanda as to what the town's preferred charge is for the tenants at the 80%. And you can see, the 1-bedroom, it's 2015 versus 1750 that the town would prefer. The state would allow in a 2-bedroom 2384 versus the town preferred 1950. And then the 3-bedroom, it's 2745 by the state and 2150 by the town. Our understanding is that the town would allow us on the 60% AMI units to utilize the state allowable rents. On the next sheet, so based on this, running the numbers, we came up with 2 scenarios that we thought would work. The first scenario is we maintain the current 150 units. As I indicated, there will be 23 affordable units. Again, the applicant was agreeable to 3 affordable units at the 60% AMI, again, one of each size bedroom. But in order to make this work, we would need to have, for the 80%, the maximum allowable by the state, and the 60%, I think the town was agreeable to the maximum allowable by the state. The top chart just shows how that breaks down in terms of the number of each bedroom. So you end up with, on the affordables, at the 80, you end up with a total of 20, which is 11 1-bedrooms, 8 2-bedrooms, and 1 3-bedroom. And at the 60%, as I indicated, 1 of each for our 23 required. So why is the applicant saying, you know, we need, if we're going to do this, we need to do the allowable by the state? So underneath that, the little chart underneath that shows the potential loss on a yearly basis. And again, if my numbers are off $10 one way or the other, I apologize. I try to take them off the various charts. But the bottom line is, on an annual basis, the project would lose potentially almost $84,000. And when and I got this from Giorgio, so I assume it's correct. When the bank goes to finance it, they use a cap rate of 0.05. So it would decrease the value of the project by almost $1.7 million. So we found that given that, we could not go forward with the town preferred rents under the current 150 unit project. I should add, by the way, that and I know we've done this I know Giorgio has done it specifically on some of the units. When they first go out, they do advertise them at the state allowable rent. And if for some reason, I mean, no one's looking to have an apartment empty for 2 months or 3 months. And I know on some of I don't know if you did it on the Westwood ones, but I know in some other towns where he has these, I know he eventually, you know, lowered the rent to move those units so they wouldn't be empty. So what we're showing is the maximum. That's what the bank would bake it on, but there is the opportunity for these rents to come down if we end up with empty units. I mean, hopefully we don't end up with any empty units. So that was scenario number 1. If you roll up one more, scenario number 2, and we just put this together saying, okay, if we applied the maximum allowed by the town on the 80%, how could we make the project work? And essentially, the way the project would work is that you increase the unit count. We'd have to increase the unit count by 160. As you'll see on the chart, what that did, since the size of the project, we weren't looking to expand in terms of the square footage of the buildings. We ended up converting a number of the 2-bedroom units, basically split them in half, to create the additional 1-bedroom units. So if it went to 160 and we applied both the town preferred rent on the 80%, and the 60%, we assume we get the maximum allowable by the state, because that was based on our discussion. So again, this still shows 3 units at the 60% AMI. And as I said, the bedroom count changed a little bit. We ended up with 89 1-bedrooms, so that went up, and we dropped the number of 2-bedrooms to 55. I believe we may have gone up. Do we go up one on the 3 bedrooms? I think we went up one on the 3 bedrooms too, because we had to maintain the ratio required under the bylaw, the percentage of the 1 bedroom of the 3 bedrooms, excuse me. So basically you end up with 21 units at the 80%, 3 units at the 60, because now we go to 24 units that are affordable. Giorgio has run the numbers, discussed this with his lenders, and this scenario would work in order to be able to finance the project. If you just go to the last slide, just an interesting one, which I put together in discussion with Mark Fougier. The interesting thing, because the bedroom mix changed, we dropped the number of, I think my math is wrong on the bottom one. That should say a total of 160 units. But the bottom line is, even if this chart is wrong, the math works out. The number of anticipated school age children actually remained the same, because we picked up 1 3-bedroom, we dropped from I think the original 75 was it 1 bedrooms, and that went to 89, and then the 2 bedrooms that went up, excuse me, to 89, while the 2 bedrooms dropped from the original 60 down to, I believe, 55. So when you run the numbers through his formula, we still, I mean, it's, one's probably 27 point something and the other one maybe 28.1, but the bottom line is we still end up with anticipated 28 school age children. I should add that all of this is that I've shown you is based on the applicant's proposal to try to provide 3 units at the 60% AMI. I know when I saw the draft draft conditions, excuse me, or proposed conditions, the town may have been looking for upwards of 11 at the 60, and we have yet to come up with a scenario that made any sense from our perspective of being able to provide 11 at the 60% AMI. So that's our presentation relative to the affordability component.
Thank you. I think before we move on to the transportation management, I'd like to hear from town staff. I mean, for me, this is kind of this is a lot of information to look at right now, and potentially, I know 10 units doesn't necessarily sound like a huge difference on paper, but we're going back up from where we had been talking about. So I'm kind of interested in what town staff thinks about this.
Yes, so as it relates to the amount of units, we are not advising an increase in units based on this proposal. As it relates to the affordable units, we did propose 11 at 60%. The applicant is now asking for 3 units. So, in making that compromise, I do understand, trying to, make it financially feasible. So that would make sense. However, we don't, as a planning board entity and myself advising to the board, there isn't a mechanism for us to condition anything as it relates to rent prices. And then, I can let Amanda speak a little bit more to that matter, but she would be the one as the housing and land use planner to be advising the housing partnership when it comes to affordability and the prices.
Yeah, so just to provide more insight into how the process has worked with other projects is Westwood has had a practice of never really, I don't know if ever, but at least not in the projects that we've monitored, in the last year, we don't go to the maximum allowable rent. And the state has indicated that we fully have that ability to push back on the proposed rents. And we do factor in things like people's cost burden, housing need in the town, what are other properties that are affordable listed at, and how do those compare? We then settle on a rent through with the regulatory agreement, but then the housing partnership and the select board both have to vote on that application and regulatory agreement before it's submitted to the state. Given our recent conversation about the increasing lack of affordability, even for people in affordable units, I believe it's unlikely that they would support using the maximum allowable rent. So with the 80%, that's where we are. Given that this would be the first property where we condition some 60% units, if that is how it moves forward, I recommended that we allow the maximum allowed rent on those, given that if they are willing to compromise on that.
Thank you. Nora, you're muted.
Thank you. If I could just make a couple of points just to clarify to the board, because it's a little bit different than what you're used to. So the zoning bylaw requires affordable units in a Mumford zone. 15% of the units must be affordable. It does not set the rent values. It requires that those units be proposed as local action units approved by the Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities and the town, and be covered by regulatory agreement. So the first step in that process is the submission of a local action unit application for review by the Housing Partnership and the Select Board. That's what Amanda was just speaking to, that those two bodies have to review what the initial proposed rents are. And they would do that upon Amanda's recommendation as our housing and land use planner. And her recommendation, consistent with other properties in town, including Gables, which is being used as a comparison property for the point of view of establishing the anticipated fiscal benefits of the project, then we have to, if we're weighing in on the benefits end, then we need to also weigh it on the rent end. So we know what Gables charges for its market rate. We know what they charge for their affordable. What we've heard from this applicant is what they would like to charge for their affordable, which is more than Gables has been permitted to charge and more than we believe the Housing Partnership and the Select Board would allow at the time of the LAU application. So I'd like to discuss that a little bit, hear from the applicant on what the market rate rents are in comparison to the affordable. Then I just want to point out that the rents that are established at the time of the local action unit application are only the initial rents. And every year an applicant can come back in and request an increase in those rents. And in each year, those increases are considered. At that point, they're approved by the town administrator and the Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities. They jointly approve any rent increases. And traditionally, the town is given deference there. So it's whatever the town administrator chooses. And in the past year, upon reconsideration of any rent increase, Amanda has recommended less than the maximum amount, and the town administrator, Chris Coleman, has supported that, and EOHLC has supported that. So just to be clear, this is not just this applicant, it's all affordable properties in town. So we're following the same process. So then getting back to a comparison to Gables, we know that Gables, for its market rate apartments, currently charges for its 1 bedrooms, a certain window, for its 2 bedrooms, another window. They don't have 3 bedroom apartments, so there's no way of comparing those. But I would like to hear from the applicant what he's projecting his market rate rentals will be for his 1, 2, and 3 bedroom apartments, because I think that will help to inform the process. And as we discuss, how many affordable units, how many total units overall.
Thank you, Nora. I know we usually we hear all the presentations and then kind of talk about everything at the end, but I think given kind of the nature of this discussion, I think it makes sense to stay on this topic. I'm also interested in Nora's question, because one of the things that I've still been kind of stuck on is the comparison to the Gables and whether or not this property, there's a lot of financial projections based on an anticipated rent. So I'm interested in that as well. And then I think, you know, I'd like to hear the answer to Nora's question. And then I'd like to, if my colleagues have questions on this subject, I think it would be good to have that discussion now.
Good, if I may, Giorgio is going to answer the rent question. We do appreciate, by the way, you know, what the town is attempting to do. We have Giorgio has other affordable units, and so we fully understand that we're talking about year one rents. So we clearly want, and we're trying to get into the project at the maximum allowable, knowing that future increases, unless the economy does some wild turnaround, I guess, but future increases we are anticipating will be scrutinized very strictly, even if the state says you can go up. I mean, that's what's happened on the other affordables that Giorgio has. He was looking to increase the rents, and the town came out with a number that was different than the state. So what we're talking about here is basically year one when we open, because that is what the bank is really going to be basing their financial projections on in terms of financing this. Having said that, Giorgio, you know, I think you have the numbers that they're looking for, and he's familiar with Gables as well. We've discussed.
Yes. So since we last met, I actually toured the Gables 2 days ago to see what really the comparison is between our property and what they offer. I didn't really see much of a difference besides a pool, to be honest. I think our property actually has a little more. And what I mean by a little more, we have the solar panels, we have the inclusive playground, we have the electric bike stations, the walking trails along the river, keyless entry. I mean, we do offer, I believe, more than the Gables. I mean, all the other things that they offer, we offer it. The package lockers, the outdoor kitchen, the grill areas, the smoke-free community. I mean, we have all that. Electric car charging stations. So I have a list of amenities. I actually printed the list of amenities that they offered. We actually have a few more than that. So in talking to, when I toured it, I actually, they compare square footage of what their apartments are for rent. So it's between $2.70 to $3 a foot. We're almost the exact same. So when I was told at the meeting, oh, they're getting $6,500 for a unit, that's not true. The $6,500 unit is fully furnished, and it's a 6-month lease. So when it comes to comparable apples to apples, we are almost the exact same as Gables. The financeability, I think that was the next. Was there another question about the pricing, Nora?
Pricing, yes. If you could tell us what you're anticipating charging for 1, 2, and 3 bedroom units.
So they range from, because of the square footage, and where they are located in each building, they range from $2,100 to $2,600.
For 1 bedrooms, is that?
Correct.
Or, okay, and then for 2 bedroom?
$2,650 to $3,100.
And for 3 bedroom?
$4,000 to $5,000. Again, everything it's all based on where the unit is, square footage. If it's on the first floor, second floor, third floor, there's a lot when it comes to renting a project of this, of what's involved in the rents.
Okay, so then just comparing the information that we have received from Gables is that for 1 bedrooms, they're charging between $2,616 and $4,223. And again, it's dependent on size. And for 2 bedrooms, they are charging between $3,640 and $5,599. So that's the information that's been given to our tax assessor, upon which their income approach to taxation has been based. So it appears that those rents are higher. Now, we could drill down on that, find out more information, and check to see if maybe those values have changed over time. And I'm certainly not suggesting that you increase rents to those amounts. I'm just saying for comparison purpose, the values appear to be higher. Now, that's not looking down at per square foot. I'm just saying for a 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom apartment.
Okay.
So then just going back, so a 1-bedroom apartment, you would charge between $2,100 and $2,600 for a market rate, but you would like to charge $2,015 for an affordable rate. So I think that right there should give you some understanding of why we look at affordable apartments as the maximum rate that Westwood typically allows for an affordable apartment is considerably less than the amount that you would charge for a market rate apartment.
So you're taking my bottom number. So you can't, as you know, you can't, with the affordable component, you can't give them all the 600 square foot units. You guys,
Right. That's true. That's true. But so even if I looked at, if we took an average of your units and then assume those were at 100% and even drop them down to 80% to recognize the difference in income. And there are residents that rent market rate apartments that would earn well over 100% of the median income. But the affordable apartments are limited to people that earn no more than 80% and often quite a bit less. So even if I looked at averaging the your 21 and 26, and then I took 80% of that amount, I would get $1,880 a month for a 1-bedroom apartment. So there are a lot of different ways of looking at it. But any way we look at it, we don't typically allow affordable rents to be as close to market rate rents as what you're proposing. So it's just the way that the town looks at it, and they look at it this way for every affordable apartment throughout the town, whether it's a Westwood Housing Authority apartment or Gables apartment or apartments in your other building or buildings owned by other people in town. We're just trying to provide the most effective affordable housing we can. But again, as we discussed, whatever value we start out with at that LAU application, that's apart from what the planning board approves. Planning board approves the project, then an LAU application is submitted, and at that time it's reviewed by other boards, the Housing Partnership and the Select Board. So the planning board really can't weigh in on the amount of rent that would be allowed, but it's just a discussion for them to be involved in so that you and the planning board understand what is being proposed and what's possible here. So if you find that you cannot manage the rents at the projected affordable rents without increasing the number of units, then I think that's important for the planning board members to hear. But I'd also want to point out that to make up the difference of what you feel you would be losing by not using the HUD maximum value and rather using the value that Amanda suggested, that's approximately $55 per unit.
How is that $55 a unit?
If you for the market rate units, if you were to increase your market rate rents by approximately $55 for each unit, you would make up the difference in your perceived loss by not.
Yes, absolutely. You also have to look at the perspective if the rate bumps a quarter point with the project on the water. So it's like it's a give and take at that point, right?
Right.
So I mean, these discussions have been hand in hand with the financing of this project.
Exactly. So these are issues you have to consider in what your final proposal is to the board, and then the board has to consider whether that's something they're willing to issue a special permit for. But raising the affordable rents beyond what the housing and land use planner is comfortable with probably is not going to be a possibility here. So I just want to make that clear. And that's not within the planning board's purview. So.
Well, yeah, not to jump in. We anticipated that, which is why we did scenario 2. Because I said, that this has never been, during this proceeding, Giorgio has never come back and just said, no, I'm not going to, we always try to come up and look for how can we address the town's concerns or the town's issues or what the town is looking for. And so, he spent a considerable amount of time saying, Giorgio, I don't want to just go back and say no. Scenario one, which is the one where we basically have indicated that, we want the state allowable rents. We understood I said, well, the planning board can't say that, and Amanda has a lot of weight in the recommendation, and I'm assuming, how towns work, that the powers to be will listen to that. So, so that's why we came back with scenario two. And we were very careful with scenario two. Yes, it's an increase in the number of units. We clearly didn't want to go there. But the reason that it allowed us to, the reason we thought it was a reasonable request, which is this way, we're going in knowing, potentially that at which point we won't be pushing for the, not that we can push, but our argument is gone for the state allowable rent on the 80%. But we thought it worked and it was reasonable because of the shift in the number of 2 bedrooms to 1 bedrooms and vice versa, and that it did not have an increase in anticipated school age children, which of course would affect the bottom line on the what we've been showing as the fiscal end of the project. And we also thought that the 10 units, and again, Ken can talk more about this, but I'm not, I don't believe that the traffic analysis breaks it down by bedroom count. They look at what type of apartment complex is it, is it a high rise, low rise, and, things of that nature. But I try to, Giorgio and I anyway said, well, we're not traffic engineers, so we'll use common sense. And you would think that there would be less people overall with the increase in 1 bedroom units, which then related to us to a decrease or at least a stabilization of the number of vehicles coming out of the complex. So there was some rationale in what we did in terms of proposing. We didn't just say, hey, let's bump it up 10 units. And, it was specifically done because we are under the assumption that the town is not going to allow scenario one.
Pete, if I could just say one other thing here. So at this point, there's not a lot of meat on the bone. I have to be honest. There is really no cushion. The planning board part of this, approval part of this, the process that we're going through with the town, it's great. It's really created a great project.
Mhm.
But to be honest with you, the easiest part is this part. The financing is the hardest part of the project right now. We may get an approval the next couple months. We may not. If we do get an approval, hopefully, that is the hardest part of this whole thing. We're in a crisis now with interest rates that have doubled. So if we just need the bone to keep going forward. If we don't have even the bone, with the planning board approval, this project may never get off the ground if we don't have financing in place. So the numbers are very, very important with this project. Now, we can't take the building down and have a hole in the ground for the next 5 years till the economy turns around. I need this project to be successful. Just as much as the town does, I need to be successful for myself and my family. So it's very, very important how these numbers are run. We won't have affordable housing if this thing doesn't get off the ground.
And we did resist. I mean, I just, again, I don't want to talk out of school, but, Giorgio and I have been having long discussions how we address this. Look, I think it's a laudable position that the town is taking. I mean, we understand it. And, the bottom line is that in this area, the affordable rents are, I would presume, are higher than in other geographical areas because it's done by a consortium of towns. And so, the one thing that we didn't want to do is, and again, I just throw the thing we resisted doing was saying, okay, we have to provide a playground. He's providing a very special, unique playground that, has a significant cost to it, as opposed to the bylaw requires us to have outdoor areas and playgrounds. And, I'm sure there is a lesser type of playground. I'm just giving that as an example. So we had a discussion and we immediately said, let's go to another way because that, and I'm probably using the worst example of anything because I'm saying the playground, but that's the first one that came to my mind. Do you take off 3 solar panels if it's possible to do? I mean, whatever it is, but that
So-
didn't, this, as Giorgio said, this process has made this project, I think better than when we entered and submitted our application, and we'd like to keep the best project possible. And again, that's why we came up with scenario 2. So I'm sorry to monopolize the discussion.
If I may, I just wanted to, so in the interest of time and making sure that we, cover all aspects of this project. So with the affordable units, we have gone down from 11 to 3 units, which is 2% of the entire property. Are you saying that you are not willing to go for the 60% at 3 units, but still maintaining the 150 units?
What was the first proposal that we submitted?
Correct. We can't, as a planning board, choose the numbers for the rent rates, but I just wanted to make sure so that we know what we're, moving forward with. Are you willing to have 3 units at 60%, given the fact that we cannot do anything on that price range?
In other words, Giorgio, make it easy. If it's 150 units, we must assume that the proposed town rents will be applied to your 80% units, not our scenario 1, but basically the town scenario, but with our 3 units as opposed to 11.
Yeah, we can't do it. We gotta take something out. Take out the park or take out the solar panels, because it's $1 million there. Not something I want to do. I don't want to take out the bells and whistles, but again, like I said, it's the we can't. I've been on the bench since we met Elijah 5 days ago. Every bank is on me. We're losing $2 million of value here with this. It's a lot of money. It's almost 4% of the whole project. So I'll do it if we take out the park or solar panels. You guys can decide that.
All right. Well, I mean, in that case, I guess we can move on with the rest of the project. I would think that you'd be able to raise rents on the market rates, but I'm not gonna, keep pushing if we're not
It's
at
an argument
if we're
that
at an
goes both
impasse.
ways. It's an argument that goes both ways because we have to worry about interest rates. And the
Just to be clear, this discussion is coming up because the request was to add some 60% units, but even if it's just 80% units, you're operating under the same conditions where you should not assume that you'll receive approval for full maximum HUD value rents. So even if we're with the 80% affordability for all 23 units as specified in the bylaw, you still get through the planning board approval. If you get a special permit, then you have to go through the LAU approval. So you're under the same circumstance. So the difference of the 60% units or all 80% does not change that. So I just want to make sure that's clear to everyone.
Yeah,
How
we
good is
did
it?
make an assumption, Nora, based on the other projects that we did, that the opening rent would be the state rent. And then after that, the town just does not allow you to increase. So we had made that assumption. So having the meeting with town staff was actually a very good thing from our perspective, because we had been moving forward under a incorrect assumption.
So Nora, just to go comment on, so how good is it if we get an approval and we can't get it financed? Doesn't get off the
Yeah.
ground. There's no
Under-
point.
Understood. So that's why you should be, before you ask the board to vote on this application, you should be sure that it's something that you can move forward with. So
we-
whether that's increasing the number of units or changing some of the amenities, you need to ask the board for exactly what it is you're going to propose.
Well, that's the option there. You have more units or which amenity, I'm giving the board the option of which amenity they want to take out. I'm up for either option. It's a numbers game at this point. But Peter raised a good point. When we first, can we do the state 80% AMI when we first open? Because that's what all the underwriters look at. And then after the opening, the town will look at it. Because at the end of the day, that's what the underwriters look at. Your first entry is 80% AMI. And if that, the maximum allowed rental income. If a year later, we're at that same number and it doesn't raise, like anything raises up, it goes up with inflation and everything else, the town and the state the town comes up with a number that it's either that or not raising, because that helps finance the project.
Yeah, Giorgio, I don't mean to, but that's what we just decided. That's what came out of the meeting with the town staff, is that the recommended rents on day one are not going to be the state rents. They're going to be that's why we went through that whole exercise.
Okay.
If I can just offer some more background, in a application I'm going through with a developer right now, they asked the same question, and in that case, not to say like we didn't recommend it, and that's generally not the path that we encourage.
And again, not to repeat myself, I made the assumption because I know on a lot of the Islington project, we started with the state, and then when the increase came in, we weren't allowed to increase. So that's, and again, bad assumption on our part. So as I say, I'm glad it came up at the staff meeting because we were proceeding under incorrect assumption. And again, I keep saying, I don't blame the town for doing what they're doing and requesting it. We just need to, we have to adjust. And again, what we came up with, the 160, Giorgio, I think between now and I don't think the board's going to pick. I think we're going to have to take a look at your, program components and then come back to the board at some point and say, this is what we're going to stay at 150 units. This is what will be removed.
Yeah, I'm taking this all in. I think my colleagues are as well. This is a really important conversation to have. And Elijah, or Nora, just for my clarification, we do have the ability to condition what percentage would be at 60% and what percentage would be at 80%. Am I correct in that? That's why we're having this conversation, or?
So yes and no. You do have the ability to do that with the applicant's approval. The way the Mumford section of the bylaw is written, it relies on the definition of affordable housing elsewhere in the bylaw, and that definition only specifies 80%. So the board, unless the applicant consents to having some lower amount, the board is limited to 80%.
Understood. But as you said, there's still the question of the threshold, even at the 80% of rent. So yeah, I think I would like to open this up to my colleagues. I usually wait to speak last, but on this, I do just want to say, like, I think I am sensitive to your cost challenges, but I'm also looking at this, this project needs to work for all parties involved, and I'm seeing the challenge here. It's also difficult for me personally. We've seen a lot of things that we have been discussing for many months kind of come off the table at the end of this, recently, within the last 2 meetings, the path, the pedestrian path, the snack shack, and it's just becoming challenging now. And now we might have to lose an amenity or add units back. So I think it's, for me, I'm having a hard time. I know that there was some hope that maybe we could move things forward tonight, but I just want to be transparent. Hearing all of this now, I think I'm struggling with the idea of having to make some decisions tonight. I don't know that I feel like I'm in a position to do that. And I just want to say that from the get-go. So at this point, I'd like to open it up to my colleagues for questions, comments, insights on this particular aspect of the project. Kate.
Yeah, hi, thank you. Thank you, Ellen. Thank you, everybody, for a really great discussion about this subject. And I can appreciate assumptions being made given history. So I am sensitive to this, and I do want to make, the spirit of for me of this project was to make Westwood a more accessible town and a more walkable location. The piece that jumped out at me as we were talking about, as you were discussing different options going forward, was increasing the number of 1 bedrooms and fewer 2 bedrooms. And for me, that didn't feel good, in addition to increasing the number of units. So there isn't a lot else that I can say about this other than I had a reaction to fewer 2 bedrooms, servicing fewer families in that way, and yeah, difficult conversation. Appreciate everybody staying very level-headed during this discussion. Thanks.
Thank you, Kate. Any other board members that would like to ask any questions or share any thoughts on this particular conversation?
I guess I have a couple of thoughts. First and foremost, like, we've been meeting now about this for quite a while, and I'm confused as to where things became so opaque, where the actual financing behind, besides just the obviously interest rates and everything else out of our control, but these requirements were obscured where the applicant might not have seen this coming, and why we didn't talk about this as a board earlier to sort of take both sides of this sort of issue, right? And for the next applicant, is there something we can do earlier on to make this more transparent? I guess that's both a question for us, Nora, as well as Georgia and Mr. Zaka as well. If you guys could respond to that, to where this misalignment came from, because like I hate to have put so much effort into this and then like there to be this precipice of like, oh well, maybe the project can't even move forward now.
If I may,
Sorry, go ahead.
just on relation to the affordability piece for the units, I've made a recommendation from the very beginning of the project in June that, and I was even asking for 30% AMI, and I've, rolled it back to 60, but I've made my recommendation from the very beginning on that, so the applicant was aware.
So
If I may, it wasn't the, it had to do with the number of the 60%, but it had nothing to do with the 60%. We had assumed, based on, I'll say, the Islington project, which is basically and a couple of other projects that we did in the Islington area, the initial rents had always been the state allowed rent. When we went to have increases, and I've discussed this with Giorgio ahead of time, I said, just be prepared that, after you open a couple of years later, you're not going to get the increase. So we had made that assumption. When it came to light was because we started having a discussion of the whole affordability component, that we were made aware. And again,
It's really just that cost.
We made an erroneous assumption based on what we had done in the past. So that, that's my fault. I should have asked the question, what would the rents be? And I did not ask them. So,
well, Peter, to be fair, we found out the lower 80% AMI rents on 11/3. Because we got an email from Amanda Wolf, and Amanda Wolf has been talking to Ali Sabatino from the DH, the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. So that's when we really found out how much lower the 80% is going to be. Then we knew about, you're right, we knew about the 60%, we knew about all that, but that's when we did find out on 11/3.
If I may, Madam Chair, I just want to, so this conversation was way before 11/3, and I don't think that's fair to put that on our housing and land use planner, that it was when she had sent an email for you to have reacted to that. You knew from the beginning that we were going to be proposing less than 80% AMI.
no, that's not.
Thank you.
If I may,
Kate.
thank you.
Yes.
I did just want to say, so I think it's fair to say for everyone involved in this project, both the town and the applicant. This is a brand new type of project. And if every aspect wasn't clear to everyone from the beginning, then that's unfortunate. But in a brand new type of project, available to all of us because of changes at the state level, and town adopting this district, it would have behooved everyone. We can point fingers a lot right now if we need to, but it would have behooved everyone to be absolutely clear on every single point of this project from the beginning, because it is new. So let's not spend more time. I appreciate going forward. We can look at things, but I don't want to spend any more time hearing who learned what when. We are where we are. I'd love to settle on where we are and see how we move forward, if that's okay with everybody. Thanks.
Thank you, Kate.
So I think part of my question was the intent of moving forward, right? And not necessarily blaming anything on any one individual, but for future applicants to make sure that we're well aligned on this. To be frank, I do see the one bedroom shift and moving up in units a bit conflicting for me, although I think it is a potential path forward and does sort of address some of the other concerns with, children in the school system and et cetera. Like, in my experience, it's much less likely, obviously, to have children in the school system with one bedrooms. So that's going to change the demographic that's going to occupy it. So to be frank, I would probably, if there was no other way, support a slight increase in units to help progress the project, but that's just my take.
Thank you, Josh. Chris?
Thanks. I'm not as concerned about the number of units. Are we at an impasse so great we can't negotiate between us? Town staff and the applicant, you guys know more about this than we just heard this tonight. So there's no way we can dive into the numbers and come up with a compromise. I would recommend the town staff and the applicant get back together and work this out. If it's not workable from both sides, then we don't have a project. And it's unfortunate to exhaust so much time and resources from the applicant's perspective, as well as from the town. But if this is the thing that's not going to get this done, okay, then fine, we don't have a project. But I think we've all addressed what the issues are. I think the knowledgeable people involved here, the applicant and town staff, need to work something out. And if it can be worked out, and come back to us with what that is, and with a good explanation as to why. I was really amazed that this deep into the project we're now talking about this. I thought this was really kind of worked out. I understand why now. It was explained why this didn't get hashed out sooner, and that's fine. I mean, we're all people, and sometimes the box doesn't get checked, and we thought it was. That happens. I like this project. I like what it does to the town. I like what it does for the applicant. But I understand both sides have a position here. So let's see if we have some ground in the middle that we can find a compromise. And I don't think we have to belabor this point anymore tonight. I think we all know what this is, where this is, and I'd like to move on to the traffic. And I don't mean to cut anyone short, but I think we've exhausted this aspect tonight. So that's just my 2 cents. I hate to see this die on this hill, unless this really is the hill that it's going to die on.
If I could just add, I think that we're all very supportive of the project and very interested in seeing an affordable housing project come to Westwood. There's not a negotiation that's possible, though, because we can't negotiate the prices of the units. I want to just make that clear. The planning board can approve a number of units and a percentage of affordable units, but then it's not in the planning board's hands, nor is it NAR's. It's up to the select board and the housing partnership to determine what they believe is a fair affordable rental price. And the only thing we're going by right now are the prices that have been approved for other units in town. So Amanda has forecasted what she expects to recommend to the housing partnership based on what other units in town have been approved at in the past. Whether that is the recommendation that's accepted by the housing partnership and select board, we don't know. We're just advising Giorgio not to assume he's going to get the full HUD maximum values. So it's not really something we can negotiate and say, yeah, we really want this, so we'll let you have higher prices. It's just not up to us. So we're just trying to make him aware so that when he puts together his performer, he's not coming to you and asking for a project that he can't build. So I agree, it's late in the process to be discussing this. We've only just tonight heard what the rental prices for the market rate units are, and we only just recently understood that Giorgio was assuming that he could get the HUD maximum. So now everyone knows that that's not an option. We're happy to move forward. We're happy to look at the project any way we can, but it's not something we can negotiate. It's up to the housing partnership and the select board to determine what's appropriate for affordable housing rents in Westwood.
Thank you, Nora, and thank you,
Thanks.
Chris, for your comments too. Phil, I know I agree. I think this is a lot, and we have shared perspectives, but I respectfully, I want to give Phil a chance to weigh in briefly if you have anything you'd like to add.
I'm just going to echo everyone else's comments. Very disappointed. I was hopeful that this was going to be more going forward, but everybody already has said what I would say, so I'm just going to go back on mute.
Thank you, Phil. Okay, I agree. If there are no objections from board members or staff, it would be productive to discuss the traffic management plan, all of that. I think that would be a good piece to move on to.
And I don't, without belaboring that, I think just so everybody's aware, the only reason the switch in the bedroom count was because we didn't want to expand the size of the buildings. So you can only fit so many units in a building. Anyway, Ken, I don't know if you want to walk through this, but I can start. We did prepare and submit a transportation demand management plan, which, as I indicated, has been reviewed by Mr. Houston. I think the key to this is the recommendations. I mean, it goes through a lot. In fact, I think we learned a lot by going this in terms of other shuttles services that exist in the area. I thought that was something that came out of this, which was very good to explore. There are a couple of private shuttles that are already running in the area, and so there's an opportunity for us to hopefully piggyback on some of those shuttles as we go forward. Specifically, I know that Giorgio has already reached out to the Moderna folks who are running a shuttle now for their employees in Norwood. Apparently, my understanding is, based on Giorgio's discussion with them, they're going to probably be looking for some housing, some additional housing for their employees. And hopefully we'll be able to also get involved in the existing shuttle that they're running. But from our perspective, Ken, you want to run through, or do you want me to?
You're on a roll, Peter.
So anyway, a lot of the TDM measures are some things that you typically see. One would be to appoint a transportation coordinator for the project. And that transportation coordinator is basically does a lot of things. The biggest thing a transportation coordinator does is make sure that the residents, as well as the businesses that will be occupying the project, have a lot of up-to-date information relative to things that are available to help reduce the number of trips, vehicle trips going to and from the property. That's making sure there's updated schedules for the buses and the routes. Once we figure out if we're able to piggyback on some of these other shuttles, doing that. They also would work primarily with the residential component, but also the commercial component, and trying to do ride share or carpooling type of things. Anything that would reduce the amount of vehicle traffic. And this is through, as outlined in this, through a number of vehicles, both online, having a presence in the building where material is available, and on a regular basis issuing flyers and brochures. Also discussed in the TDM is an online transportation kiosk, which again is something where everybody within the complex would be able to access, anywhere that they are. And again, giving them up-to-date and available information in terms of bus schedules, MBTA schedules, ride sharing again, also about the Uber or Lyft services that would be there. And then things which have nothing to do with vehicles, but take away vehicles, which be, bicycle paths and bicycleable resources that are available in the area. The transportation coordinator, when anybody comes in, would have a welcome package to provide all of the tenants. And in this case, again, we're adding commercial aspect as well. Really attempting to promote the bicycle amenities that are on the property. And to me, some of the more exciting ones are so given our proximity to the MBTA station, clearly showing, and now we have, I know there's a disappointment. I know one of the proposed conditions is that we continue to attempt to get a more direct walking path from the back of our property. That's in there, but currently now we've outlined two paths that could be walked, and we think each one is a 15 to 20-minute walk. We still think the one going Everett to Washington may be the shorter one, but there's also another route, and that will be promoted. But also providing actual subsidies that the applicant would be implementing. And one would be that we would provide $100 credit applied to the first month's lease if for any tenant that shows an ownership of a Charlie card evidencing that they have MBTA ridership. In addition to that, as I indicated, trying to coordinate so that we can get involved with existing shuttles that are in the area. Also in this is that at 75% occupancy, we will poll the residents regarding the demand for our own shuttle service that would be operated during the weekday peak hour, which is peak period 6 to 9, and during the afternoon, which is 4 to 7. And I've had other projects. You usually got to wait to get enough people in there, but so we figured 75% would do it. And as long as there's ridership that makes it prudent to have that, we will do that. In addition to that, we would provide parking credits, and basically a $50 credit to any tenant who actually comes to the property who doesn't have automobile ownership. Ken, can you augment anything in case I've missed it? But I went through that fairly quickly. And as well as the stuff that I know Mr. Houston had added that we added into this.
Right, yeah, Mr. Houston adds that we add the retail employees as part of it, as well as not just going to the Islington Center station, but also over to the 128 station as well, to get potential for more ridership over on that line. But yeah, that's a real good summary.
Thank you. I see we have Tom Houston here. Oh, sorry, was someone else? Sounded like we had some background noise. Sorry, I just wanted to make sure I wasn't cutting anyone off. Good evening, Mr. Houston. Nice to have you here.
Good evening. It's a pleasure to be here. We did review the TDM submittal, and I thought it was very comprehensive. I would not disagree with any of the applicant's proposed measures to provide incentives to minimize the number of single occupant vehicle trips to the site. We had just two comments, and one was simply to expand the TDM measures to include the employees of the retail stores. Now, there's probably only going to be 15 or 20 employees there. If 10% of those are persuaded to not drive to the site, it's only maybe 4 trips, but still, as long as they have the transportation coordinator, it's probably prudent to have him or her also serve the employees of the retail stores. The other comment we had was that it would, I think, be beneficial to all if the proposed shuttle service, if it does come to pass, and the applicant has said that's dependent on demand, which is reasonable. But if there is a shuttle, we actually included in our report a potential route that would have the Islington station as an interim stop, and the entire route would also include the 128 station, because a lot better train service on the at the Route 128 station. So that expanded route is only 3.4 miles long, and that takes about 10 minutes under light traffic conditions. So I think that's a worthwhile add-on if the shuttle comes to pass, adding the 128 station as a stop. But other than that, I thought the report was very comprehensive, and I think it will be effective. Thank you.
Thank you. I would open up the traffic part of the conversation and the TDM to board members for questions, comments. Not seeing any hands raised. I'm shocked. Well, I have a few. I'd prefer to let my colleagues go first, but not seeing any hands, I will start. Forgive me, I have a lot of notes here. Some of them are in my notebook, some of them are on my phone, some of them are about the TDM, and some are not. So bear with me for a moment. One question / suggestion that was suggested to me was to put out the idea of Giorgio joining the Neponset Valley TMA, because I think that the idea was there'd be some overlap there with the transportation demand management plan, and it could actually, they could work with you with all of your properties in this area. So I don't know if that's a group that you've already spoken with or something you've considered. I think you're muted. I can't hear you. I'm sorry.
No, still nothing, Georgia.
No. Here.
Maybe type it into the chat.
Or I can move on to another question. We can come back to that. You might need to try and disconnect and reconnect your audio if it's getting strange. It's showing you as unmuted, but I don't think we can hear you.
If you click the little arrow next to the microphone icon in the bottom left-hand corner, you'll see select a speaker and select a microphone, I would check to see that the microphone is set to the right device.
Still no audio.
Yeah, you might have to log in and log back in, potentially.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, sorry. So
No
yes,
worries.
we plan on reaching out to them. I think when we had the meeting with Elijah, that was one of the discussions we had, was trying to reach out to them. And actually, good point. Maybe we can add the other properties in Islington to that route.
Great. I had a question. It's actually about the parking situation, but I think it kind of relates to traffic management. We had talked before about, charging for parking and restrictions. What is your current plan for how you're going to handle parking? And are you providing free spaces for residents? Commercial aside, but for people who live there and guests, what is your current plan for how you're going to manage the parking?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I missed your whole question. I just heard, how am I going to manage the parking?
Yeah, we talked before about to kind of discourage people who live at this complex from bringing too many vehicles, to not make it so easy with not an abundance of free parking for residents. And we had discussed maybe not providing free parking and charging for the parking spaces. And I was curious what your current plan is for that.
So all the interior parking will be charged. I think majority of our parking is actually inside. I don't know the exact count, but so a lot of the parking will be charged. So that will discourage a lot of vehicles.
Would you, another question, because I can follow back up on this. What is your vision for the coordinator? Is that a full-time job? Is it a part-time job? Is it a title that will be applied to someone who's already an employee of yours, and this will just be an additional responsibility?
So we'll move one of my property managers to the site. It'll be handled by our staff. That employee will be directive about they'll directive not only about parking, but also about the train, the buses, and all the amenities of walking and what's close and what's not. We have a program that you get text messaging or emails of, they give you a map of the property, they give you allocations of Uber, Lyft, all those apps that are out there. So yeah, we do have a full-time, we will have a full-time staff on the site.
Okay, that's helpful. I guess my concern with unrestricted parking, because I've lived in buildings that are multi-residential, and human nature being what it is, if I have to pay for one space, I'll pay for one. And I've seen it in other places I lived, even when I wasn't the person doing this. People will park extra cars in the spaces that aren't necessarily, don't have a license plate associated with it. So that's still a concern of mine. And, not just that people will bring extra cars, but also potentially they'll be parking not just in the unrestricted spaces in your property, but potentially down the street at Roach Brothers or across the street at Rose Court. I'd like to see something that's a little bit more concrete about the contingencies to prevent the potential domino effect to neighboring properties. Because I think the intention is good, and I like that the underground parking is all restricted, but I'm still concerned about the tendency of people to want to bring their cars with them, and that they may try.
One other thing, Ellen, that we do offer, when somebody leases from us, they get a sticker or a tag. So our team, typically, we do a sweep, whether it's in the morning or afternoon, depending on the project, but typically they just sweep to see who's there and who's not, because we will have parking for example, the commercial employees, the people that visit the commercial spaces. So our employees will be able to see who's really a resident here and who's not. If that car's been there for more than 24 hours with no sticker on it, they're obviously not welcome, or they may be a guest. If they do have a guest, they're requested to check in with the office and say, hey, I have a guest for 24 hours, 48 hours, and then we give them a guest sticker.
Great, thank you.
So it's monitored around the clock.
Okay, that was one of the things I was curious about, is what what level of involvement, for lack of a better word, is there as far as kind of monitoring the parking lot and who's where?
Mhm.
All right, I'm going through both of my sources here. Team A. I have a question. I did watch the select board meeting last night, and there was conversation about the intersection of Washington and East Street and the Islington Center project. And that made me think about, we've been talking about traffic impacts of this project. And I know I've read the traffic studies, and Norwood's peer review was favorable. But I guess I'm wondering if we, and whether or not you would be amenable to adding a condition that either in X number of years, or when the project is 70 to 75 to 80% complete and occupied, if we could revisit the traffic and, gather some real-time data, because I'm still concerned about modeling and projections versus actuality. And I think we're seeing some of that at the intersection I just mentioned. That's what I was hearing last night, is that modeling was saying low wait times, whereas the reality is the wait times can be minutes. So I'm just trying to think ahead, that it's very possible that the projections we're seeing with this project won't actually pan out to be the reality when there's real people with real cars and real traffic. And I don't mean that disrespectfully at all. I just, modeling is, I think, in some ways limited. So I'm wondering if we could condition a future traffic study in whatever, whether it's completion phase or an amount of time, to revisit that and make sure that the impacts are what we believe them to be. And if not, that there's room for some mitigation there, because that is, traffic impacts and congestion is still the number one concern I'm hearing from many, many residents, and the long-term effect of that, and what recourse there is if that does happen.
I guess I want to refer to Ken and Peter. Peter, did we put something in that COA regarding that? You're on mute, Pete.
No, in the draft that came from Elijah, it specifically talked about the traffic light, I think, at the intersection of Washington and where they all converged. I'm looking for it now.
Yes, I can read that off. So there is a condition that speaks specifically to the signalization. Well, I won't read it in its entirety, but it does state that, prior to the issuance of the first certificate of occupancy, there would be a study or any needed adjustments would be taken.
To the signals, right? Yeah, I was thinking something a little more comprehensive and maybe a little further out, like once people are living and working and visiting there. I like that condition, but I was thinking something a little longer term, and not just the signalization, just, kind of more, are we seeing more volume than was initially predicted? And is there anything we can do about it at that point? That kind of revisiting the issue.
I guess in 3 years from now, it's hard to try to determine, like, if there's a project on the corner of Moderna opens up, and there's another project on the corner of University Ave and Route 1, that's a 28-acre site. How do we determine if that traffic is because of my project or down the road? I guess I'm open to options. I just don't know how to narrow that down.
Yeah, one of the things we could do, well, just if I could, two things. One is on the condition that Elijah just read. I actually put in that we would do that when we had, I think I put 80% occupancy, because I'm not going to tell you any different now. While we're building, it's not going to be any different. So what we could do is in our traffic report, we had predicted what would be generated basically coming in and out of our site. And it would not, I think we've done this before, and sort of like a test to see how good Ken is, I guess. We actually do actual counts of the vehicles coming in and out to see if our projections were, within that area, and then if not, we go from there. You know, if they're significantly more than initially predicted, then, you know, there's some wording as to what happens at that point. Then maybe that requires a further study. But usually the first step we do is through the prediction of, which is I use the word prediction. ITE handbook says you have this, and you know this is what it should be generating, so those type of counts I think we've done on other projects just to see that what we had predicted in terms of the volume coming out of us is what we said it was. The reason for that is that it then offsets what Giorgio's concerned about, which is a true concern, is that there is a potential for other projects, not only in Westwood, but in other surrounding towns that could impact that same area. So we know what our impact is, and is it what we had predicted it would be at the beginning.
Yeah, I think actuals like that is exactly what I'm interested in and would be helpful on many levels. So if you're amenable to that, I would be interested in that. Josh, you have your hand up.
Yeah, just to sort of echo what, you know, everyone was sort of saying, you know, I know in the next 6 months, for instance, Upland Road is going to get another traffic light that's going to change those traffic patterns. I don't think Moderna is going anywhere, just as an FYI. But yeah, your point's well taken. But I do think those actual counts would be really beneficial for us to reevaluate in some point in time, like to have it time bound as well, not out, you know, 5-10 years. Like that doesn't make sense to me. So I appreciate your accommodation, at least conceptually around that.
Yeah, I think that'll work. That works in both levels.
Ken, wipe the sweat off your brow. I see you sweating there.
Thank you. I'm scrolling through my notes again. I had a couple of other questions, but not related to traffic or the TDM. So did my colleagues have anything that came up during that conversation they'd like to ask or share? Not seeing any hands. Elijah, Nora, Amanda, any staff comments on the TDM or traffic in general?
Yeah, typically the applicant is required to do a TDM after the project. So the fact, or after a decision has been rendered. So the fact that they've done that beforehand is definitely is good. And the fact that they've offered, you know, different mitigation factors on the site, I thought it was a good report.
Thank you.
For a historical comparison, I just want to point out there was a development of Progressive Insurance that may have been 7 or 8 years ago. And the planning board at that time required that applicant to put funds aside for improvements to the intersection if they were needed, and if the state allowed the changes to be made within a 5-year period of time. And if they could not be made within that 5-year time, then the funds were returned to the developer. In this case, I don't think we're looking for the developer to put any funds up front, but your question about a traffic study, another look at it, you know, 5-year time period is probably a reasonable time period. That's what the planning board had determined in a previous application.
Thank you. Okay, any other conversation or questions around the TDM and or traffic in general? I'm not seeing any hands from anyone raised. Was there any other information or presentations that you would like to make this evening?
Yeah, I had sent, I don't think we want to make a presentation. I probably have a conversation with Elijah. I had sent some suggestions today in terms of some language, assuming this goes forward on some of the proposed things. The one thing I do want to make the board aware of, we've talked about it in terms of the construction part, but specifically it is the intent of the applicant to phase this project, which is probably to build the front building first, prior to starting construction on the second building. So when Giorgio has always talked about the window of how long, why he's been using this, what have you been saying, Giorgio? 3 years
Yes.
is because that's the intent. And I did add some language or suggested some language relative that at least I want that acknowledged in the application. I mean, if there is a decision as one of the conditions that he does have the right to phase the project, meaning build one building and actually start occupying that building before he does the back building, the front building before he does the back building. I think most of the other items, I think were more, well, for me, wordsmithing. I hope there may be more than that when Elijah gets into them, but I think most of it was, trying to recognize that this phasing, because a lot of times it said prior to the issuance of building permit, I would add in for the first building and things of that nature. Don't believe. Giorgio, jump in. Am I missing anything that you and I discussed that we thought would be a topic to bring up to the board? I can't remember any.
Oh, the trucks, construction timing.
Oh yeah, and that I thought we'd work. I mean, I don't know if the board.
Did we work that out? I don't remember. Sorry.
That's more for staff. Yeah, there was a discussion. One of the suggestions is that we read it to be during the construction period, that trucks were limited to the going to or from the site between like the hours of 7 and 9 and 4 and 6.
Right.
Are prohibited from entering during that time period. Typically
It's
whatever the hours of construction are is the hours that the trucks come in.
Right. It's a very it's impossible. It's impossible to do in the construction business not to work with trucking material from those times. Those are the most important times in the construction business.
So if I may, Madam Chair, so I guess on the first part for the what was it, the phasing, you would need to present us or update your site plan to show exactly what you're indicating for the phasing, what the proposed schedule would be, and you're saying that there's the first building versus the second building. We would just need a little more information on that. And then as it relates to that last piece, I understand what you're saying. We can definitely kind of rework those hours.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, the rest of your language regarding keeping trucks off certain roads is well understood. And I think that's about it.
Thank you. Josh, I see you have your hand up.
Yeah, from my understanding, you all did talk with the school board as well, just somewhat recently. Did you guys want to sort of fill in everyone on that? I think some of the public might be of interest in the board for that matter, those discussions and outcomes.
Want me to do that, Giorgio, or you want to do?
Yeah, you can do that because you're.
Yeah, I'm going to apologize because I'm not going to list the people that were there. I know the superintendent was there and Elijah attended that meeting. I thought it was an exceptional meeting. Again, in the hindsight, I wish we had done that months ago because it really provided us the opportunity to get into the fiscal analysis more, but more in particular relative to the schools. And I think there was, I'm using the word general agreement, that we covered our bases in terms of looking at the costs that are associated or could potentially be associated with the schools. We also spent considerable amount of time showing with Mark Fougere, running through his analysis in terms of the projection for the number of students, and why what we actually think it may be a conservative, meaning a little bit on the high side. I think we did it for this board, but I think it was stated to this board previous, and I know there's no 3 bedrooms over there. But Mark actually, ran his analysis on the Gables, and he actually got a number that was higher, at least than their current. I understand when they first opened, I think Nora had informed us that when they first opened, they may have had a higher number. But running his analysis on that, which was a nice demonstration just to show, how his system works or not. He was actually a little bit higher than the current enrollment from that aspect. And again, I thought it was a great meeting. We did make an offer to the school department that when we reach a certain occupancy, I don't remember the number, maybe was it 75% or anyway, when we reach an occupancy level, we will notify the schools of that, and then we'll coordinate with them and have them certify to us the number of school age children actually in there. And we did offer, if we go over was it 28 students?
28 students, yeah.
28 students, that we would provide a payment, a one-time payment of $10,000 per head above the 28. I don't know how it was worded I did see it in the decision. We weren't sure where that payment would have to go. So we left it, we said to the school department or to some fund they tell us to send it to, but wherever. And we did that to show some good faith and our I think our reliance on the numbers that we have, that we've been using. So I did see that Elijah did carry that forward into some of the proposed conditions. Anything you want to add, Georgia?
No, they just gave away 10 grand to the kid, that's all.
Well,
Not if your numbers are right. Not if your
I'm
numbers
not giving
are right.
away anything.
I'm confident in my numbers, very confident.
But I think that's another good example that you guys should sort of talk about and talk through with the board and everyone else and the public, that like you are making that effort, and you are confident in your numbers. And you're trying to put your money where your mouth is. What that exactly looks like, I mean, can be debated, but like, I think that's a fantastic step. So,
thank you.
Yeah, if I could add, part of the reason is that, and part of the discussion was that, even if you shave a little bit off what we're predicting, and again, I think the peer reviewer agreed with it, but even if you take a little bit off of the revenues, and even add a little bit to the cost side, this project is still hundreds of thousands net positive, so that there is, just in our original numbers that we project, that in terms of the dollars, there is sufficient monies in there that would never be used. I mean, we would really have to be, considerably off on the school age, and I have confidence in Mark's numbers because I've used him on. Again, we have a couple of 3 bedrooms in here that we don't have in other projects. But every project I've done with Mark, I found that his numbers are a little bit higher than what actually happens. I mean, things fluctuate. Some emergency comes up or whatever, but typically he's pretty good with his numbers. So we have the confidence. And again, we just did that as a good, Giorgio did that as a good faith gesture. So I think that's it.
Thank you. I actually have a follow-up question on that. I'm just curious, hypothetically, what if it turns out there is a flocking to Westwood? I appreciate that condition as well, and I'm glad that you got a chance to sit down with the school board. I guess the only thing that I'm a little concerned about is that it's structured as a one-time payment. What if, it does turn out we get a lot more kids? And one of the other outstanding questions I had was about the valuation. There's been a lot of talk about that you use the Gables as the comparison for what you expect to generate for revenue and what our tax benefit will be from the project. I had a couple questions about that because I know there was some back and forth. When those calculations were made, were they only calculating this project at the residential tax rate, or did they actually factor in the commercial tax rate for the 12,000 square feet of retail that's proposed as well? It wasn't clear to me from either the peer review or either the report or the peer review response. It wasn't explicitly clear to me what the answer to that was.
Yes, we included that. I think what happened was it was raised as when the comparison with Gables keeps coming up, and I think the initial peer review raised that as a question, saying that there was a question on the, I don't know, I think it was the land value part of it, maybe. But that was resolved because Mark showed that in fact he had taken into account that we would have commercial, a portion of the building is commercial, so that is taken into effect. And with the split rate, typically you get more from the, I mean, it's only 12, what do we have, 12,000 square feet, but it's still, from a revenue perspective, comes in more. At the end of the day, the valuation of the project from an assessing perspective is, as we all know, based upon, income, what is being produced in terms of rents. And, we are, Mark Fougier, and I apologize, I know Mark had a conflict this evening. Otherwise he would have been here as well. But I know Mark, himself he did look around for a comp in the Westwood community, and then had conversations with I believe it was the Board of Assessors, just to, tell them, here's what we predict, think our rents are going to be, to see if that was comparable. But I think it's more, at the end of the day, this building is going to be assessed, and the revenue it generates based on the income, which is the rents that we've been talking about for the project. So I think, and Mark is, spent a lot of time after it was questioned as to the Gables being a good comparison. And he augmented one of his reports that was submitted to show why it is. But again, it wasn't done in a vacuum. He did talk to, town personnel who do the assessing. And as Giorgio had indicated, he thinks the rents are in line in terms of unlike the sort of per square foot basis type of thing, that this would generate revenues similar to that. I will say every applicant I work with wants to depress what the assessed value would be, because they think the assessors is listening, and if they go too high, it may go in. But I think it's we're again, numbers run by Mark Fougier, and again, we think they're very good numbers.
Yeah, thank you. And tonight, obviously, we finally heard what the proposed rents for this development are, so I could probably do some math and kind of figure out what I'm trying to get comfortable with is that net projected $350,000 after $350,000 after expenses per year. Do I feel comfortable with that number? Am I confident that that's true? Because if that's off by $10,000, that isn't super impactful. But if that's off by $100,000 or $150,000, and the service calls for police and fire end up being more than what we think it might be, and the impacts to the schools might be more than what we think it might be, that profit, the net benefit to the town, could very easily get cut into to the point where it's not as profitable as we had hoped, or worst case, we're barely breaking even. So that's what I'm trying to really drill down into and understand and feel comfortable with, because that is also part of my process and a priority as far as this project and moving forward. Is it really going to be as beneficial to the town and not transfer any costs to other residents who are here unduly as part of moving things forward? So that's why I was really pushing at that. I had one final question. We didn't really talk much about the playground tonight, but the last time we saw you, I think, was when we had the full presentation. And I know that there was a lot of talk about the Flutie Foundation. And my question there is, how involved are they? Are they, to be frank, are they contributing financially to the construction of the playground? Because I know typically they do that.
They do. So I think we spoke last time, a couple of days ago with Elijah. We are still coordinating with them. It is an ongoing process. I guess this is not your typical playground where you have a swing, you just set it in place. It keeps changing, and they have to, with everything being inclusionary, there's a lot of different moving parts. So there's actually a condition in the COA saying that we have to bring a design plan before we start construction of it. So there's a lot of moving parts to it. The Flutie Foundation and the Zach Heger Foundation are very involved with it. The funding, we are funding the project.
So I'm sorry, I didn't understand. Are they contributing financially or just advisorily?
Advisory.
That's a word. Okay. Thank you. That's helpful. I think that's all I have in my several different spaces of notes. Did my colleagues have any further questions on any other aspects of the project that we haven't necessarily seen new information on, but any lingering questions on any outstanding items? Mr. Houston, was there any further input from you? I don't want to not revisit you if there was anything else you wanted to add. You're muted, sorry.
Not at this time, thank you.
Thank you. And any other staff comments?
No comment. I guess just it seems like the board, well, I'll let you guys decide, but in the event that a decision or a continuation is made, there is definitely some things that we'll be working out with the applicant to tighten up.
Thank you. As this is a public hearing, I'd like to open it up to public comment at this point. Just as a reminder, for public participation, we ask that you give us your full name and address. You can either enter that information and what you would like to say in the Q&A, or please feel free to raise your hand and we will enable you to speak. And I see we do have a couple of questions in the Q&A. I can start with these. First one is from Margie Iramo, 48 Clapper Tree. Has the board delineated, or will the board consider delineating the roadways to be used by large construction vehicles going to and leaving the site during the construction process? I think that actually came up in the course of our conversation. Do we need to add anything to that at this time? I think that was.
So yes, there is a condition that will make sure that there isn't any heavy truck traffic or truck traffic at all on any of the non-arterial roads, and also Clapboard Tree Street.
Thank you. Oh, and I think that was the other question, specific roads. It was also from Margie Aramo, 48 Clapboard Tree. Thank you. I'm not seeing any other new questions. You're welcome, Margie. Thank you. I'm not seeing any other questions in the Q&A. I'll give it a second if there's anyone in the attendees that wanted to raise their hand or enter anything.
Someone had their hand up earlier and they took it down. I don't know if it was Steve Olenoff. I don't know if he had something.
Oh yes, Steve, did you want to speak? I'm not seeing Steve's hand go back up, nor am I seeing anything in the Q&A.
So this has been a pretty long hearing session, and I don't want to make it any longer, but I do think it would be helpful before you close out and continue it to your next meeting, where hopefully you'll be able to make a decision on the project. I think it would be helpful for each board member to give their opinion to Giorgio as to whether or not increasing the number of units is an option at this point, if it's necessary for his financials.
That is fair. Is it appropriate for me to just kind of go around and call on people and ask for their feelings?
Yes, so it's just a poll of the board, and you're not held to this, it's just giving some direction. So he has some understanding when he goes back and looks at the financials again.
Okay, yeah, I think that is a great idea. Chris, would you like to go first?
Nora, are you asking our opinion if we're okay with more units?
If you would accept more units, if the unit configuration had to be changed in order to make the financials work, knowing that Giorgio cannot expect to receive the maximum HUD value. So is the project worth moving forward to you enough that you would consider additional units, or would you prefer no additional units and not consider the special permit?
I would consider additional units.
Kate?
Nora, sorry, can I just be clear? Are we talking about additional units, but not increasing the size of the facility, correct?
I think that's the proposal, Giorgio. Is that what's
Correct.
proposed right now?
To just be clear. Thank you.
And I'm sorry, Chris, did you?
I said I would consider additional units.
Okay, thank you. Josh?
Likewise, given the mix, I would consider additional units.
Thank you. Phil?
I'm disinclined on the additional units. I think this is a long ways down the path. So if there was no other force, my initial is a disinclination.
Thank you. Kate?
Yeah, I would have to see that a lot of work has been done before I'm willing to give up 2 bedrooms for more 1 bedrooms. I definitely don't want to see the project get bigger, but I'd really have to, my hope is that we can service families with this facility. And I mean, I'm open to it, but I'd really, it feels extreme to me. Not
Thank
extreme, but yeah.
Thank you. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Yeah, I'm legitimately on the fence about this. I've heard that it sounds like, at least initially the recommendation from town staff was to not increase the number of units. I'm also not thrilled about losing 2 bedrooms. I think this came up once before when it was presented to us as increasing the number of 1 bedrooms as a positive. But for me, given that the whole point of the state legislation is family friendly, I'm not super jazzed about losing the 2 bedrooms. But I also don't necessarily want to see this project go away. So I really I'm on the fence. My initial thought is I wouldn't really love the reconfiguration. But like, if you had to ask me to decide right now, I don't think I could. I'm really torn. So I'm glad I get a little more time to think about it. But I think I would like to see if there's a way to make it work the way we've been discussing things for quite some time, if that's possible.
Thank you.
Okay. So at this point, it sounds like we should entertain a motion to continue this to, what would the date of the next meeting? Would the next meeting be enough time for you, Giorgio and Peter, to be ready does that give you enough time if we go to our next meeting and not a couple meetings out to come back to try and move forward with this?
When is that next meeting?
December 5th.
If I invite Giorgio over for Thanksgiving, yeah, no, I think that worked for you, Giorgio. I mean, are you gonna have to try to reconfigure the building? Are you meeting a second time in December or not?
Yes, on the 19th.
I guess keep it on for December 5th. And what's the next date?
December 19th.
Okay. keep it on for the 5th, because I won't be at the 19th. So keep it on for the 5th, and I will try to crunch some numbers, and I'll meet with the bank hopefully on Thursday then. Yeah, I
Great.
just keep it on December 5th for now.
Okay. Thank you. So I would entertain a motion to continue this public hearing to our December 5th meeting.
So moved. Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll take a roll call vote. Chris?
Aye.
Phil?
Aye.
Kate?
Aye.
Josh?
Aye.
I vote aye as well. Motion carries. Thank you, everyone. I know that that was a long conversation, but I believe it was a very important conversation. And thank you, everybody, for your patience and participation. And we will see you December 5th. Have a nice Thanksgiving.
Thank you.
Have a
You
nice
too.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Sorry, let me pull up. I have to go back to meeting outline. Next on our agenda was 1054 High Street, continuation of public hearing for consideration of a limited environmental impact and design review, EIDR, to construct an addition to a private school building with parking alterations at 1054 High Street, continued from 10/24/23. This is the hearing that they had requested an immediate continuation, Elijah? Yes? Was that
That
also
is
to
correct.
December 5th? Or
To
the
December
19th? Okay, then I would entertain a motion to continue this public hearing.
So moved.
I probably need the date, right? I should have been more specific.
I move that the planning board continue the public hearing for the limited environmental impact design review, EIDR, for 1054 High Street as described in the application therefore submitted to the planning board and filed in the office of the town clerk on September 13th, 2023 to Tuesday, December 5th, 2023 at 7 p.m. via Zoom, where a Zoom link and associated call-in numbers will be provided on the town's calendar on the homepage at https://www.townhall.westwood.ma.us/.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll take a roll call vote. Kate?
Aye.
Josh?
Aye.
Chris?
Aye.
Phil? Didn't hear you, Phil. Sorry.
Aye.
Thank you. I vote aye as well. Motion carries. We will take that back up on December 5th. Next on our agenda, Morgan Farm Estates, consideration of request for release or reduction in surety for Morgan Farm Estates definitive subdivision. Okay. And do we have, is Mr. Petrosi here?
Yes, yes.
I've promoted him, but he hasn't accepted it yet.
He did email me a few hours ago that he was gonna take dinner and be back by 8:45. If you're willing to take the other items out of order.
I'm amenable to that, unless there's any objections from my colleagues. I think that makes sense to keep things moving. Seeing no objections, I redact what I said and, the warrant article conversation could be lengthy. Should we move on to that, Elijah, or should we move on to the rules and regs first?
Rules and regulations.
All right. So we will take item 5, consideration of the continuation of the public hearing for consideration of amendments to various planning board rules and regulations, continued from October 24th, 2023. All right, Elijah, I'm happy to let you speak to this.
So I'm actually happy to speak to that. I'm about to lose power. So
no.
I'm just gonna try and plug in. So if I fall off, I'll get right back on.
All right.
So we've had a hearing that's been open and continued numerous times for the rules and regulations. I believe they were first presented at your meeting in June. And there are a number of sets of rules and regulations, all of the board's rules and regulations we're trying to update. Most of the updates have to do with changing to electronic permitting and eliminating the paper requirements. But there have been some other changes. There have been updates of fees. There have been addition of new sections of the zoning bylaw that weren't in existence the last time we did this. For instance, Mumford, the mixed-use multifamily overlay district, we have no regulations for it. So even though we have an application that's currently before you, the board has yet to adopt regulations. So I have not heard any comments yet from any members of the board. So I'm assuming that you just haven't had the time to read through the rules and regulations, but it may be just that you're perfectly happy with all of them as they're drafted. So I wanted to hear from the board to see if there are any concerns with any of the sets that have been presented before. I think I presented them at the first meeting. I think it was in June. Or if you're, if there's some changes that are needed, if you need more time, I would very much like to get some of these rules and regulations approved. And if you want to go through them one by one, approve one at a meeting and come back at the next one, I can do it that way. I just don't want this to continue indefinitely.
Thank
Go
you.
ahead, Kate.
Yes, Kate.
Yeah, so I'm going to fall on my sword here and say I have not read them. But my issue, Nora, I have to admit, is not that I need more time. I need paper. Can you guys, is it possible to get it printed? I will read anything if you give it to
Absolutely.
me in paper. Great.
Absolutely. Is there anyone else who would like paper?
I'm the exact opposite. Once Elijah asked, I asked Elijah for it digitally, then I could read it. But yeah, just finding it was the hard part for me. But I actually think you guys did a fantastic job. I do want to understand, do we anticipate any, it's within our purview to force digitization in the bylaws, and there's no qualms with that from a state perspective or anything else like that? I'm assuming yes, but
It's totally within your authority, and it's what we've been doing in practice since 2017, but we haven't implemented regulations that require that. So today, if someone wants to apply with a paper copy, we have to accept it. But if you adopt these rules and regulations, we would not have to accept paper going forward.
and to be frank, although I appreciate the diligence of going through, I found it to be a quite easy read. You guys made it very succinct. The red lines were easy, perfect. I mean, there was a lot of changes, but they weren't substantive, oh, we really need to ponder these changes. Like you said, it's codifying what we already doing, and which I've done as a homeowner, for instance, with some of the, how to go for a special permit to the ZBA or whatever, having to go through that online process. So.
All right, thank you. So Kate, we will get you paper copies tomorrow and read them when you can. And hopefully if all board members have a chance to read through them, we can maybe get some adoption of these on December 5th. That would be very helpful.
Thank you.
Yeah, I read through
Agreed.
some of them. I read through most of them. I looked at all of them. I spent more time in some of the ones like the scenic road one, because I was getting questions about that. And my takeaway was this: it's cleanup. We're not changing the effect or the meat of any of these. It's a sentence didn't start with a capital letter, and that doesn't look good. So we're fixing that. Or the wording is strange and doesn't read well and is actually less clear and maybe leaves us open to problems, so that we're really just tightening things up. So I will read them all. The ones that I did not read as carefully, I will read again, but I was very comfortable with what I saw, and that these were improvements that were not changing. We weren't rewriting the rules and regs. It really was truly like a housekeeping and a streamlining endeavor.
Just updates, revisions for clarity and for consistency with the actual practices that we have now. that's about it. And then just adding new rules and regulations for the sections of the bylaw that didn't exist last time. All right, well, I appreciate that. So if you could then continue this hearing until December 5th, then hopefully we'll be able to approve it that night.
All right, thank you. And thank you for all the work on that. I know it was a lot, but important. So I will entertain a motion to continue this public hearing to our December 5th, 2023 meeting.
So move.
Second.
Second,
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll take a roll call vote. Phil?
aye.
Josh?
Aye.
Kate?
Aye.
Chris?
Aye.
I vote aye as well. Motion carries. We will revisit this on the 6th. Do we have Mr. Petrosi back yet?
I just promoted him again, so we'll see. Oh,
All right,
he's joining.
Oh, great. All right, then our next agenda item will be Morgan Farm Estates. Consideration of request for release or reduction in surety for Morgan Farm Estates definitive subdivision.
I don't know what happened. It gave the notice that he'd be rejoining as a panelist, and then he disappeared completely.
Yeah, I see that. Okay.
Oh.
Nope, we have him. All right, wonderful. Good evening, Mr. Petrosi. How are you? We can see you, but I think you're muted.
Hi there, how are you?
Hi, great, how are you?
Sorry I had to, I got stuck behind that 22 Everett Street again, and I wanted to have dinner before it got too late.
No worries, totally understandable.
I know you folks put in a long day.
Well, we are glad to have you, and if you wanted to just kind of fill us in on your application and what you are looking for this evening.
Well, essentially, I'm just looking to have the bond or the security agreement relative to Morgan Farm Estates released in its entirety, and we seem to have been, I don't know if you recall, but the planning board released or held back like $9,000 from the total amount that was being held for a couple of as-built plans and for a couple of catch basin manholes covers that had been raised following the finished pavement of the roadway. So there seemed to be a question over, from Beta as to making a reason for not releasing those funds. So we're simply asking the board to release the monies and release the bond, and let's move on.
Thank you. Were there any questions or comments from board members? Josh?
Stupid question. Have all those conditions been met?
Well, as from my perspective, as the contractor and the person who hired the people to do the work, in our opinion, all of the work has been completed that is required to be completed under the subdivision rules and regulations. There was just to give you a little history of this, the DPW and a Wall Street development sort of cooperated with one another to make the final pavement on the roadway. As you may know, that part of the roadway is public, the rest of the roadway is private. That's part that's the subdivision part. So we collaborated because the town wanted to pave a continuous stretch of roadway from the public portion to the private portion. So we, Wall Street, used the subcontractors and the vendors that the town used to prepare the roadway for the final pavement and to actually conduct the final pavement. Unfortunately, the contractor that was hired missed these 3 manhole covers that were not raised prior to the pavement being applied. So following that surprise, Wall Street, we went in and we raised those manhole covers to finish grade, and we paved the areas just like you would typically do prior to paving the roadway. So there seemed to be a question of that it wasn't inspected while we did the work. So that's the reason why Beta made the comment that because they didn't observe the work being done, that they couldn't give it their blessings. So quite honestly, the Beta hadn't been out there to observe any of the work that had been on for years. So I think it was a kind of inappropriate for them to insert themselves into the equation for 3 manhole covers that, quite honestly, is such a minimal part of the entire project that I can't believe we're still having this conversation.
Thank you for the background. Elijah, did you want to share anything from staff/town perspective?
Yes. So Beta did do their review of the project. So at the last meeting, we had held up, or the board had voted to hold up $9,900. That $9,900 was to account for the manhole covers that were paved and not found adequate based on our engineer peer review, as well as an as-built plan to be updated. Since then, the applicant has updated the as-built plan. Beta took a look, and they said that it was adequate and that it met their it passed their review. So based on that, I think that it would be I would suggest the board to release the $3,300 that was itemized for that as-built plan. The remaining $6,600, I would not advise the board to release until there was a town staff or a town designee to be able to witness a paving of those drainage manhole covers.
Thank you. Were there any, now hearing all of that information, any other questions or comments from board members? Kate.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I do recall this being in a somewhat similar situation the last time we were all together, and that there was a certain amount of disappointment from the other side that not everything was released. But I'm inclined to make a motion as outlined by Elijah, if I get the wording for that.
Excuse me. This is not going to work. Okay.
I second the motion.
Well, let me just say this, that if you want to hassle over this $6,600, I'm perfectly happy to do that. I don't want to get into the legalities of where this bond reduction stands with regard to the release of the funds, but I think planning board should seriously consider releasing the entirety of the funds. There's nothing that's going to change. We're not going out there to do any of this additional work. In fact, I'm going to hold the DPW responsible for the cost of doing this work over again, since it was their contractor that was hired to do the work. So in the spirit of cooperation, I think that the board should consider favorably reducing the bond to 0.
Noted. Thank you for your thoughts on that. I think I'm inclined to entertain a motion. Oh, Josh, sorry, you have your hand up.
Just for my understanding, what would the ask be at this point then? Would be to tear back up that pavement and for town staff to observe the repavement of that drainage? Is that like what the ask is here?
That's exactly what they're asking us to do.
And
just for my understanding, what would the risk be of damaging said drainage while excavating it?
It's just cost. What would, say that again? Excuse me, I didn't hear the question altogether.
Like, what is the potential for just damaging the drainage that's there after milling it down and or excavating?
There wouldn't be any damage. It's just
okay.
It's work that's unnecessarily to be done. I mean, what you're essentially saying is, we didn't see the hole that you filled in, so dig the hole back up and let us see you fill it back in. That's essentially what we're being asked to do here. It's kind of I don't want to say it's ridiculous, but it's ridiculous.
Elijah, is this kind of standard procedure as we, that?
Yes,
Yeah.
it's standard procedure. The town has certain standards for roadways, and the reasoning for withholding that money is in the event that the applicant cannot do it to the standard of the town, we would then take it upon ourselves to do it.
There's absolutely no regulation. There's absolutely no rule or regulation in your subdivision rules and regulations that calls for this. And quite frankly, Beta did not inspect any of the work that was done on the subdivision. And we've had numerous bond reductions over the last 10 years.
Mr. Petrosi, I think the board understands clearly your position on this. I think at this point, it's appropriate for a board member to make a motion, whatever motion someone is inclined to make, and we can see if we get a second and see if the motion carries.
Ellen, sorry, before I make a motion, it seems like Chris might want to say something. I just want to see what he might have to say.
You.
Oh,
sorry, Chris, I did not see you. Thank you, Kate.
Okay.
Kate, you're calling me out on something.
I'm sorry. Before I get started, I just wanted to see. I'm sorry.
I wasn't sure if I missed a raised hand.
The planning board accept in part the proposed release
Do I have a
tripartite
raised
agreement for Morgan Farm Estates Phase 1 and accept the partial release of the tripartite agreement for Morgan Farm Estates Phase 2, both of which agreements were entered by and between the Westwood Planning Board, Wall Street Development, and Needham Bank to secure completion of the work associated with the roadways and installation of utilities for the full project, including all phases of construction for the planning board's open space residential development definitive subdivision as described in the planning board's decision titled Minor Modifications of Open Space Residential Development Definitive Subdivision Approval dated February 26, 2013, and filed in the office of the town clerk on April 9, 2013. The proposed release is intended to reduce the amount of phase 1 tripartite agreement from $2,000 to $1,000 and to reduce the amount of phase 2 tripartite agreement from $7,900 to $5,600. The combined $6,600 balance is intended to secure the correction of inadequate pavement be witnessed by a town official or their designee.
Can we can still have discussion after I second, yeah?
Yes.
Great, second.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
I would like a little clarity if I could. Mr. Petrosi said that we are essentially voting against the work done by our own DPW on this paving. Is that accurate? Was it our DPW who did this paving, or?
Well, it was a combined, Mrs. Chairman, I don't, if you don't mind. It was a collaboration of, we used the same paving contractor and the same vendors that the town uses to do.
But did we contract them to do this work?
You contracted, well, we split the bill. So I don't know what the wording, what the correct relationship would be, but the contractor for the town, LaRusso Corp., who did the paving, hired the people that raised the manholes covers and the catch basin covers. They just simply missed these three. And you know, I've talked to DPW, you know, listen, you guys want to hold the money, go ahead and hold it. I'm going to be fighting with the DPW to reimburse me for the funds or the cost of doing this work over again. I mean, I'm not asking for that at this point. Well, I just want the money that we're entitled to have.
Okay, I just asked the one question for clarity's sake. I think we have to follow our procedures with regard to the reduction in this bond. If that results in an ancillary issue that you have with our DPW, then I don't think that's inside our purview. I get what you're saying, and I'm not saying you don't have a concern, but we have a procedure here that I think we have to follow, because we have contractors coming in behind you, and we have to follow the same procedure with them.
Well,
we can't. Sorry.
Well, not that I want to interrupt, but I mean, I think this is, you know, if you really want to go by the law, by the regulations, and by the statute, the board is already in default, and it's already, the bond reduction has already been constructively approved. If we want to get into that legal aspect of it, you know, please, I have no problems. I have no problems going in that direction. I'm trying to find a reasonable middle ground here. What we're really talking about here is going out there and digging up pavement that we've put in place and repaving it so that somebody can look at it. That's what you're asking us to do. So have the DPW go out there.
Sir, I'm gonna,
Mr. Petrosi, I think we understand your perspective. Actually, the notes that I have refer to temporary patches that need to be replaced.
They're not temporary. They're not temporary.
Understood. But I think, you know, also I'd appreciate it if you addressed your comments through me rather than directly. And that's fine. But I believe my colleague, Ms. Nguyen, had a comment she wanted to make. I saw your hand up for quite some time, Kate.
Thank you. I did just want to say this is essentially where we ended at our last discussion around this. And so I think we should just move forward. And as Chris mentioned, if there are ancillary events, that's it. But I believe that our committee has completed our discussions. We have a motion, we have a second, and let's just vote on it.
Agreed. Unless there's any further discussion. Did we get Phil back? It looked like he was in the attendees. Phil is back. All right. I have a motion and a second. We had further conversation. Any other discussion amongst board members? Seeing none, I will take a roll call vote. Kate?
Aye.
Chris?
Aye.
Josh?
Aye.
Phil?
Aye.
I vote aye as well. Motion carries. All right. Looks like Mr. Petrosi left. All right. Was this a public hearing? I've lost track. It
was a
was,
public meeting.
It was a public meeting, so there is nothing to close. All right. And so I'm looking here. Given the hour, and I see we have a couple of things left on our agenda, would it make sense to discuss the reappointment of our alternate, or because I think he was here. I don't know if he wants to continue to Yes, he is still here. Take that before the warrant article conversation? Okay, then if
Yes.
there's no objection, I'll take that out of order. Okay, seeing no objection, we will discuss item number 6, reappointment, discussion on reappointing of planning board associate member. Elijah, would you like to kind of give us a quick summary of what that entails and what we need to do?
Yes, so the associate member of the planning board is appointed to terms, and his term is actually up. It expires tomorrow, November 15th, 2023. And so he has requested to be reappointed, and the board will be asked to make that recommendation to the select board at their, and the board will also be requested to attend the select board meeting on December 4th, Monday, to take up a vote in the event that you recommend Mr. Olenoff, which we advise you to do so. He's an active member of the community and has been very, has a wealth of knowledge as it relates to planning. So we would definitely advise the board to take up the motion for another 3-year term.
Thank you very much. Good evening, Steve. Thanks for joining us, and thank you
I'm
for
here for any questions or anything. I
Awesome,
was
thank you.
around before when you were asking for me, but I'm having these little doing a lot of things here at once, all at once. And the questions I had before were just minor details compared with what you were talking about on that, so I could always catch up on those later. But yeah, so I'm interested in being reappointed for as associate member of the planning board.
Great. Appreciate you volunteering. Were there any comments, questions, anything from my colleagues?
We're lucky to have you, Steve.
So I
Thanks,
want to
Josh.
comment that I think the town's been doing the right thing in appointing people who have been in past in these positions. So you have that experience, and so all the experience that I and Steve Rafsky bring as associate members means we get able to step in right away and any time we're needed. So that's what the select board and the planning board has been doing. So I think that's worked well, and I think it should continue.
Thank you. Okay, so if I heard correctly, we would need to make a motion to reappoint Steve Olenoff to whatever the terms are, however many year term, and then
3 years.
3 years. Thank you. Well, and if that motion carries, then we would go to the select board and have the joint meeting.
That is
Okay.
correct.
So it sounds like at this point, it would be the right time to entertain a motion for an appointment recommendation.
I move that the planning board recommend the select board appoint Steve H. Olenoff to a 3-year term as planning board associate member, which would expire in 2026.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll take a roll call vote. Kate?
Aye.
Josh?
Aye.
Chris?
Aye.
Phil? Couldn't hear you,
Aye.
Phil. Thank
Aye.
you. I vote aye as well. All right, the motion carries. Thank you, Steve. And
Thank you.
we'll
Thank you,
see
Steve.
you at the select board meeting on December 4th.
Thank you.
Thanks, Steve.
All right. So now I think it's time we get to the consideration of amendments, continuation of, sorry, wrong thing, warrant articles, discussion of potential warrant articles for May 2024 annual town meeting. Okay, is this Nora or Elijah is going to be point on this conversation?
I'm going to be point on this one. Elijah can take it up next time, but since he hasn't done this yet, I thought I would just get you started. So tonight is your first discussion about what potential warrant articles the planning board might want to sponsor at the May 2024 town meeting. I have a couple suggestions I want to start with, and then hear from the board what other articles you have in mind, or if there are any of these that I recommend that you're not interested in taking up. So the first one, and the one that will require the most legwork, is an expansion of the mixed-use multifamily overlay district. This is something that we are required to do by the state under the MBTA Communities Act. We must pass zoning that allows for by right multifamily development at the density of at least 15 units per acre, covering at least 50 acres in town, and produce with the ability to produce at least 870 units of housing. 50% of this 50+ acre zone overlay district would have to be within a half a mile of a train station, and 50% of it does not have that restriction. So what we have so far, we adopted the first Mumford zone that you're reviewing a proposal right now for 22 Everett Street within that zone. The zone covers not just that property on Everett Street, but it covers 2 parcels on University Avenue, Gables and Westwood Estates, not Westwood Estates, Westwood Place, the Pulte condominium complex. It adds up to 16.16 acres. So we need to come up with approximately 34 more acres to be added to this area. And we need to make sure that in addition to adding the additional acres, we come up with a density allowance of at least 870 units. So what I'd like to do at your December meeting is present some possible areas for you to consider in rezoning them. And some of them will be within a half a mile of train stations, and some of them will not. If there are any particular areas any board members want to suggest, let me know those areas, and I'll be happy to do some mapping so that I can have the information you need to go through at your next meeting.
So Nora, we need 9 acres within a half a mile of a train station. We already have 16.
Right.
And
Yes.
then the rest.
You could have all of it could be within a half a mile. And the original intention of the MBTA Community Act was to get development within a half a mile of the train station. At the time, DHCD guidelines, now EOHLC guidelines, expanded that because there were communities that were having difficulty putting all the development close to the train stations. But the fact is, to be the most effective development and to not increase car travel, keeping as much of it close to train stations as possible is a good idea. But we'd have to have at least 9 more acres close to the train station.
Wasn't the train station the main impetus behind
it? It was.
And,
the guidelines really, if you look at the law itself, the law is very short, very succinct, and the guidelines are not short or succinct. And they expanded upon the law tremendously. But nonetheless, we are committed to meeting the guidelines as well as the letter and spirit of the law. And that's something that we need to do. And we need to bring a proposal to voters at the Maytown meeting that will be a sufficient proposal to succeed in a town meeting vote. So this is going to take a lot of work by the board to review the different possible ways of going about this and choosing the one that you believe is not only most effective, but most likely to be passed by town meeting voters. So I'd like you to be prepared in December to start that discussion. And I think the discussion will continue at each meeting until at least until the first meeting in March, when you have to bring the final proposal to the Finance and Warrant Commission. All right, so that's the first area that we'll have to tackle, and the one that I think will take a lot of time. So keep that in mind as you consider what other articles you might want to tackle. Make sure you have enough time, enough bandwidth to do that. So the next one is
Nora.
Yes.
Before you continue, I was just wondering, are there any specific preclusions on current parcels that we would look to have a zoning overlay on.
Yes, you can't, the guidelines are very specific on what you can't zone. You can't zone school properties, you can't zone state-owned properties, you can't zone ball fields and land that's in Article 97 protection that cannot be developed. So you really can only include within your zone property that's either privately owned and could be redeveloped for multifamily housing, or publicly owned with a dedicated effort to redevelop it. So if you had some town-owned land and the town was committed to rezone that, not only rezone it, but actually develop it, you could get the state to approve that town-owned land. But generally, we're looking for non-town-owned, privately owned land.
Perfect. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, so then next on the list is a possible resubmission of the sustainability article from 2023, if necessary, if the Attorney General's office does not approve that article. So the Attorney General's office has been reviewing that article since June of this year, and they asked for an extension, which takes them through the end of this month. So we'll know by the time we meet again in December, on December 5th, whether or not the Attorney General has passed the sustainability article. If they haven't passed it, then I would recommend whatever is necessary, whatever tweaks they are suggesting, whatever's holding them back from approving it. I recommend that we revisit that article, make whatever changes would be necessary, and try again. And that's not heavy lifting. So we'll hear, if hopefully the Attorney General will pass it as it's written, but if there's a concern, they'll give us direction on what we would need to do to pass it. So if anyone's agreeable to that, I'd like to tackle that.
If they don't comment on it, it's implied approved, correct? Or it is approved without comment?
Yes, yes. If they approve it, they either approve it with no comments at all, or they comment, suggest you be careful in how you implement the bylaw. So that we'll just have to wait to see. So it's probably another week or so. We should have comments, and I'll let you know as soon as they come in.
I guess for further clarification, if they do not provide comments by the date, it is approved.
Yes, yes, it is. Unless the town gives another extension, and I would not expect we would. They have to approve it by the end of this extension. All right. And then the third article that I think the board should take on, you've heard from Verizon that they're interested in putting a wireless communication facility at University Station, specifically at 85 University Avenue on top of one of the Gables buildings. So I think the board ought to consider its own article that that looks at the where and under what conditions you would consider wireless communication development within University Station. So a little bit more broader than what Verizon's looking at, that doesn't just address their one issue, but that looks at it for the district as a whole and makes some reasonable assumptions about what would be good for the town in that location. So I'd be happy to prepare a draft for you to look at for that as well. Then the building department has a couple of concerns with existing definitions in the bylaw. They're suggesting that we look at clarifying definitions for lot width, for detached structure, and for accessory use. They're asking to add an illustration of average height. Westwood measures that a little bit differently than other communities, and the building commissioner has actually produced a drawing that he'd like the board to consider adding to the zoning bylaw that might cause less confusion to developers and homeowners who are looking at putting on additions. And then they also wanted to take another look at how we define wall and fence height requirements. Right now, if you build a retaining wall and put a fence on top, we measure from the bottom of the wall to the top of the fence, and if it's 7 feet or less, you're allowed by right. If it's 8 feet or less, if it's 8 feet, up to 8 feet, you can get a special permit. If it's over 8 feet, it's simply not permitted without a variance. So they want us to just take another look at that and make sure that that's the most effective way to achieve our goals in not having spike fences. So those are the only zoning bylaw articles that I currently have on my list. But if there's anything that board members want us to take a look at, let us know and we can draft additional ones. Just keep in mind how much time we'll be spending on the Mumford district. Then for general bylaw amendments, if the board is interested in doing any of those, I have two potential ones on the list. One, Josh had asked that we take another look at the dumpster bylaw and see if there's a way we can write requirements for temporary construction dumpsters that are different than the requirements for a permanent dumpster, but still fall under the general bylaw for enforcement. So that's something that the board should think about whether they want to address. And then finally, there's a general bylaw amendment. This probably doesn't have to be a planning board sponsored one, but the Conservation Commission recently approved new leash regulations for walking dogs on conservation properties. And there's some interest in having a general bylaw amendment to take our animal control section of the general bylaw and adopt the same leash requirements that the Conservation Commission has adopted on the conservation properties and apply that to all public property townwide. So that's another one that I will probably be working on drafting. I don't know if that's something that the planning board has any interest in sponsoring. If not, then it would be an article that would be proposed by the select board. So that's all I have on the list, but I'd be love to hear from anyone if you have anything else in mind that you'd like to tackle at this upcoming town meeting.
Excellent, thank you. I see, Josh, you have your hand up.
Sorry, everyone must be sick of me. Specifically for the dumpster one, personally, I'd like to consider non-residential temporary dumpsters as a specificity to move away from the homeowners and more towards the developers, which I think that they have the means and should have the expectation to implement this pretty easily. But I guess a second one that I might put out there is the adoption of Chapter 90, Section 17C for speed limits throughout the town, specifically for thickly settled or business districts. This is a fairly easy one. I don't know if that falls under the general bylaw or not, but I would like to bring it up as something that we can consider to help speed control, especially in some of our more densely populated neighborhoods.
So on that one, I'd have to check with town council. I'm not sure if it's actually a general bylaw amendment or adoption of the Mass General Law section.
Yeah, I think it's an adoption and then it might end up having to be a vote even. I'm not sure about that, but either way, I'd like us to at least consider that. And I think it meets a lot of the desire of the town for a more pedestrian friendly environment specifically.
Thank you, Josh. Kate.
This might not be popular, but I do not have an interest in the leash one.
Okay.
So I'd say let's spend our time on something else.
Okay.
Thank you, Kate.
And that one doesn't really fit within the planning board's usual articles. So it's an article I'm working on, but it's not an article that has to come from the planning board.
Anyone else have ideas or anything they'd like to see brought forward?
Just a thought, what Nora just brought up, would a speed limit bylaw be something sponsored by the planning board or authored?
That was going to be my question.
Yeah, so that typically would be the road commissioners, which is the select board.
That's what I was thinking, select board. So I mean, it's one of those, if they are the sponsoring, do they look for co-sponsors or do they just present?
They could. We've had bills before, or not bills, articles that were co-sponsored by the planning board and the select board. So that's a possibility.
Yes.
Why don't I follow up with town council and see if that's something that's already on his agenda to work on with the select board. And if not, I will suggest that we have at least one planning board member who's interested in pursuing it.
Yeah, specifically to that too, Chris, like there is, like it can be townwide, but it doesn't have to be, right? Like we could present specific areas of the town, specific streets, specific communities within the overall town that are more impacted. And that's where I sort of see the dovetailing in with the planning board. Obviously, the business districts as well could also have impact there, so.
Bill or Chris, anything else you'd like to toss out there as an idea for something to add to our list?
Not at the moment.
No, nothing for me.
All right, great. Well, then we'll continue.
I got a couple.
Oh, go ahead.
Sorry. Couple of mine and one actually from Steve Olenoff. And I'll start with Steve's. He had sent me a note. He suggests that we should look at some of our landscaping bylaws and amend the section on parking lot landscaping to provide for and encourage solar panels in the parking lots by eliminating tree requirements where there are solar canopies installed. The planted islands should probably remain with bushes only or could be reduced in size and number to encourage more panels. Areas north of the solar panels should continue to have tree and planting requirements. I thought that was an interesting idea to try and incentivize canopies. So I don't know if that's something the board is overall interested in, but I thought that was an interesting way to maybe get some more adoption of parking lot canopies. Speaking of canopies, the one that I would like to revisit if we can fit it into our schedule is the idea of kind of the townwide tree canopy. We talked about it a little bit last year, kind of in conjunction with the sustainability work we were doing, but there was so much on the plate. It was one thing that we just couldn't add to it. But every year I'm seeing our tree canopy with a capital T and C getting smaller in town. And I feel like every year we wait, and I do understand we have a lot of priorities, but every year we wait, that canopy is getting smaller. And there are very few properties I'm seeing that are planting an abundance of trees by choice and certainly not. I see a lot of Norway maples. I'm not seeing the native species that I think would, really be beneficial and important for our habitat in town. So I'd like to revisit that if we can. And another Steve Olenoff suggestion was, and I don't know if this is a planning board thing or not, but there've been some recent changes to the stretch code, again, kind of related to sustainability. Is that something we want to try and see if we want to adopt, if we want to take it up a notch?
So actually, we automatically adopted the stretch code changes. So when we adopted the initial stretch code, town meeting adopted it with language that required additional changes to automatically be approved. So we are applying the current stretch code.
Oh, great. Okay, so that's already there. Excellent. Okay, so then I guess just the solar panel canopies and incentives there, and the tree canopy, if there's room and interest in either or both of those.
All right, and then there's one more that I left off my list that came out of the climate action, resiliency, sustainability discussions that we had. There seems to be some interest in a leaf blower limitation bylaw. That would be a general bylaw. So that's something else that if there's time and there's interest, we could work on that as well.
Yes, thank you. I had that in the back of my mind too, because I was at a table where that came up. So definitely.
That's a gas mower, a gas motor.
Gas
Yes.
motor leaf
Right.
blowers, yes. It would probably be an amendment to our noise bylaw that we have now that only applies to construction equipment, and it would take it beyond construction equipment to landscaping equipment.
Excellent.
All right, so that's a lot of amendments. So we'll start drafting, we'll work on them, bring them back to you in December, and then you can look at them and see if there are any that you don't want to go forward with, then we can put them aside. But if you want to, we'll pursue all of those.
Excellent. Oh, and I see Steve Olenoff has his hand up, so I probably misspoke on something. So since I was sharing some of his ideas, if it's all right with everyone, I'd like to give him the opportunity to speak since he's still on, just to make sure that I captured his thoughts correctly. Hey, Steve.
Okay,
So, here I am. So I think there are like three different building codes out there. There's a regular, there's a stretch code, and now they have a resiliency stretch code, which came out about the end of last year. And I know Brookline has already adopted it. So there is something that the town can go through that process again to accept this new stretch code. I don't know if we want to do it or if the planning board is the one that should be doing it, but I just want to make everyone aware that there was this another, it's like a stretch code, and it came out of the fact that some towns tried to ban gas hookups, and the Attorney General found that that wasn't permissible. So this stretch code does not ban gas hookups, but in order to achieve the requirements of it, it'd be pretty hard for you to have any gas. And I don't know how many towns have done. I know recently, last week or so, another town adopted it. So it's out there, and I just wanted to bring it to everyone's attention.
So this is different than the stretch code requirements that came into play on July 1st?
Yeah, because they updated the regular building code and they updated the stretch code, and then I believe they have a third one that is now available. It's it gets confusing and complicated, but it was like, people said to me, "Hey, haven't you heard about the new building code?" And I know definitely in less than a month, Brookline adopted it because they were the ones that really were interested in eliminating gas hookups.
I think there
I
were
don't know
4
anything about it.
communities in the
I'm happy to
Commonwealth
look
that
into
adopted
it.
that.
Yeah. No, I think not that many so far, obviously.
No, and Newton voted in March to adopt it per January 1. So they voted it, but they're allowing their residents to get some last ditch permits in.
Thank you. Yeah, so that it sounds like it might be worth thinking about or deciding if we have time for it and interest. But thank you, Steve. I had a feeling I hadn't quite captured
Well,
that
I was
correctly.
just clarifying it because sometimes I think, gee, doesn't anyone else know about it? I'm glad Chris knows about it. But it's very slow catching on. We're getting out.
That's only because I'm trying to get permits done in Brookline and Newton. That's the only reason I really know about it.
Yeah, Brookline and Newton seems to be the leaders in all of this stuff.
Yeah.
Well, I'll take a look at that. I'll see what I can find out, and I'll speak to our building commissioner. I know that we are having a lot of residents who are having a hard time complying with the changes that went to effect on July 1st. So depending on what the additional changes are, that it may or may not be feasible for Westwood, coming so close on top of the changes that have already been implemented. But
the differences may not be that great, but
they might not be. If it's all just about the gas hookups as opposed to about the HERS ratings and the increased requirements for renovations, that's what's people are having a hard time with.
Yeah, we have a house in Newton that was built on 2x4 exterior walls, and to get the R value in there now, it's costing about an additional $40,000 to fur out those walls to get the bay depth to get the right R value. So it's a big brand. This is a 120-year-old house in a historic district that you can't alter all that much. So it's coming with some ancillary problems for the homeowners. And the gas hookups, most people are fine saying, "Oh, I'm fine with an induction cooktop," but that also means no gas fireplaces. So it means if you want a fireplace, you need a masonry built wood fireplace or a wood stove. You got to buy wood. You have to, there's a whole lot of other things that come into play. So anyway, just my own anecdotal.
All right. I'll see what more information I can get on that.
Thank you. All right. So, we didn't open a hearing or anything, so we can just, okay. We'll revisit that at our next meeting and have a more detailed discussion. Thank you. All right, so next on our agenda is minutes, our minutes from our October 24th, 2023 meeting. Did folks get a chance to look at those? And did anyone have any comments or corrections that they wanted to amend?
I did watch the meeting. I wasn't here at the last one. Should I abstain?
If you
Yes.
watch the meeting, yeah, you should abstain. Thank you. All right, then I would entertain a motion to accept the minutes from the October 24th, 2023 Planning Board meeting as written.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion on the minutes? Seeing none, I'll take a roll call vote. Josh, we'll start with you.
Abstain.
Phil?
Aye.
Chris?
Aye.
Kate?
Aye.
I vote aye as well. Motion carries. Next on our agenda is updates from agency and committee representatives. Has anyone attended any meetings that they wanted to share information from? Not seeing anything.
I guess.
Elijah?
Just an update on the climate action resiliency and sustainability plan. We finished the set of community visioning sessions, and so right now I'm really encouraging folks to take our survey that is live. Just going to share the screen real quick to navigate to where that is on the website. So if you're on the website, you can go to government, and then you go to, actually go to departments, community and economic development. You can go down to planning division, click on that. And then on the sidebar, you can go down to the climate action plan right here. And then you have this lovely page where you can click on the pictures here, and it'll take you to our general survey and then our youth survey as well. So just encouraging people to take the survey if you can.
Thank you. Excellent.
When
Yes,
does that
Kate.
close?
There's a soft deadline or a soft closing date of December 15th, depending on how many responses I get, just keep it open.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I've been trying to start sharing that around, but I will work harder to share that link around, try and get some more folks to respond. Thank you for all your work on that, as always. Appreciated. Anyone else have anything
problem.
they'd like to share? Sorry. Anything else anyone would like to share from any meetings, if you've been to any committee meetings?
Long Range and Financial Planning had a meeting this morning, but it was really more of just kind of an overview by Stephanie McManus, what she presented to Select Board last night. It was just kind of give everyone the full global understanding of the town budgeting in its current financial situation. So as it pertains ostensibly for how we think about capital projects that may be coming up in the near to mid-distant future. So that was really what it was. It was anything really big to report. I believe you can see her presentation on. I think they recorded it. So, and Nora, can you confirm that it's somewhere out there?
I believe it is. It's the same presentation she presented to the Select Board, and I know that
Right.
West Virginia Center filmed the Select Board meeting.
Right. So you got to there. You can see what she did. Gives you a good basic understanding of where we are financially and all the factors in play that are taken into consideration for projects.
Great. Thank you. Yeah, I'm hearing on the wind there are several asks coming up for capital projects. So I'm interested in that presentation. So thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right. I didn't see anyone else with hands raised to share updates from committee meetings, so I'll move on to our next agenda item, general miscellaneous updates and administrative items. We have upcoming board meetings on December 5th. It sounds like we'll also be attending the select board meeting on December 4th. We have a meeting on December 19th and January 9th of 2024. Hard to believe we're already there. And we also were given a schedule of it looks like, you know, the next year's worth of meetings. Amanda, yes.
You can talk about the schedule first. I'll go next.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry.
I thought it was about the schedule.
No, sorry.
No worries. Elijah, did you want to speak to the schedule or anything like that?
Yeah, I sent the schedule out. Take a look at it for next year. I think the only date that I would point out is that the first September meeting next year is the week of Labor Day. So just let me know if that works for the board or not as I draft the schedule.
Thank you. Anyone have any preliminary questions on the meeting schedule?
Just one other note, in April, on the second meeting in April is the day after Election Day, so it's a Wednesday. So just make note of that.
And that's typically when we have our board reorganization as well, right?
No, that's after town meeting.
Oh, right. Sorry.
First
Yes, after
meeting in
town
May.
meeting.
Yeah.
Right. After everybody's sworn in. Okay. Any other discussion on schedule? Okay, Amanda, yes, you had your hand raised.
So Nora and Elijah both recommended that I update the board on 436 Washington Street. So we're in the process right now of doing the regulatory agreement and application for the 5 local action units that will be at that property. We're still in the process with the developer, but we wanted the board to be aware that the applicant is proposing charging a rent comparable to a 2-bedroom affordable unit at Gables. And to refresh your memory, these units were less than 600 square feet and were originally studios until the planning board asked that walls be added. But they don't even meet the minimum size requirements for a 1-bedroom, which the state has already agreed to waive. But just to give you a sense of our concerns about their proposed rent, which is roughly $2,100 a month.
$2,100 a month would be considered an affordable rent for a 600 square foot 1-bedroom? If that's what's being proposed?
Yeah, because this is what kind of calls back to our earlier conversation of the 80% AMI limits, because we fall under the Boston, Quincy, Cambridge metro region. The income limits are really high. Like a household of one can make up to $84,000 roughly. Like the limits are high. So he is technically allowed within the state's limits. But as we discussed earlier, Westwood's practice has been to set a more reasonable rent within that. But ultimately, you know, I'm in discussion with them now, but ultimately the housing partnership will be the first to vote on this. And so if they don't agree to come down, it's up to the housing partnership as to whether or not they'll endorse it.
So I guess that begs the question. I mean, I if I remember correctly, we condition the approval of that permit on those units being affordable. What happens if there's no agreement on the rent to be charged? How does that play out?
Well, I mean, ultimately it is the condition to, like, they have to be approved to get his certificate of occupancy. So hopefully that incentivizes the developer to cooperate. We did have a discussion with the lottery agent, and maybe there wasn't open communication there as to what really the unit looks like size-wise and what's actually reasonable. So they're still in discussion with us. They're still working with us, but that is where they stand with their proposed rent.
It's just another
mean-
instance where an applicant looks at the HUD maximum rent and just makes the assumption that that's what they will charge regardless of the unit, that they'll charge the maximum 1-bedroom rent for a 1-bedroom unit, the maximum 2-bedroom rent for a 2-bedroom unit. And in Westwood, we don't look at it that way. We want affordable units to actually be affordable to the people who live in them and to have the rent to have some relationship to the actual unit that you're paying for. So a 600 square foot unit should not be charged the same amount as a 1,200 square foot unit.
Well, and
Agreed.
perhaps I misheard. I thought, Amanda, you said that the developer was looking to charge for a 2-bedroom, because again, Giorgio was quoting market rate rents of 2,100 to 2,600 for a 1-bedroom. So I'm trying to figure out anywhere 2,100 would be considered an affordable rent for a 1-bedroom. So I'm sorry, I'm just a little
Yeah.
surprised by that. That's a high number. So
Yeah, the 1-bedroom units, based on the fiscal year 2023 HUD limits, a 1-bedroom can be up to 2,370, I believe, if I remember the number. So they are allowed to propose up to roughly $2,400 for a 1-bedroom, even if that exceeds some market rate
Understood.
apartments. Yeah.
I just had a thought. This is twice we've had projects where these discussions seem to be happening late in the process. Is our system need a tweaking to address this, to have the frank conversation very early on in the application process, as opposed to, in this case, the special permit's already been approved. I'm just thinking out loud here. It just seems like we're allowing for that 11th hour negotiation where really many times it turns out nobody wins. I don't know. It just seems like we have to rethink this about when we have the discussion, so that at the very least, we know that they have that information. This is how Westwood does it. This is, I'm early on, not right now.
One possible way of addressing this is in our rules and regulations update. We could add to the rules and regulations a section about affordable units and just make a note in there that the planning board does not approve affordable rents, that you'll have to go to the housing partnership and the select board to file your application with the state. And it has been practice in the past for the town not to approve the HUD maximum rents. So we can suggest that they contact the housing agent for further discussion.
Well, that way they're not pricing the project accordingly. I mean, it just seems like, no. Has anyone addressed bringing up changes to rules and regulations in the past?
And then we don't get the 11th hour kind of update that is after months of going down the road. I completely agree with Chris. Totally agree with Chris.
Yeah, as do I, because it's literally twice in the same meeting where I found myself having the same reaction, which was, which I mean,
very much strongly agree.
Yeah,
Well-
I don't want to have that reaction again this far into a discussion about any project. Really, it's not productive for anybody. Kate, yes.
If I can just say, some of the parties outside of the town are the same in both cases. So I don't think we have possibly as wide of a problem as it would appear, because there's two separate issues. Some of the players are the same externally. So it would make sense that that there would be some confusion in both of those projects.
Will point out, to Kate's
Good
point,
point.
they use the same lottery agent and attorney.
Yeah,
That may be a
that is
drafting
very good
issue
point.
for regulations for us to consider. I couldn't endorse that more heartily.
One other thing I also suggested to Elijah earlier today was that in the application portal for projects with a certain threshold of housing units, adding a step for housing comments, because right now they kind of just get grouped in with wherever it falls.
That
Good
sounds
idea.
great. Anything we can do to make it more clear for them and to have projects move forward. Like we want these projects. So yeah.
Yeah, thank you for that update. That's it's very illustrative and just I appreciate being kept on the loop in the loop as to where that project's going because I noticed there really wasn't a whole lot of movement. Nothing seemed to be being built. So I was thinking like, you know, when are those apartments going to be available? And it sounds like there's some extemporaneous issues with that. So thanks for that update, and I'll be interested to see how that resolves.
Thank you.
That is, sorry, were there any other general miscellaneous updates and administrative items from anybody? All right, I'm not seeing any, so I would at this point entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion on adjournment? Seeing none, I'll take a roll call vote. Kate?
Hi.
Josh?
Aye.
Phil?
Aye.
Chris?
Aye.
I vote aye as well. Thank you, everybody, for your work this evening. Have
Thank
a great
you.
Have a great Thanksgiving all.
Yeah. Have a
Happy
good holiday,
Thanksgiving.
everyone.
Good night.
Good night.